2 minutes, Mayor.
Okay.
You're on.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the work session of Las Cruces City Council. Today is Monday, September 14th, 2020, approximately 1 p.m. Before we begin, if you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and now we're going to start off with our pet of the week, and Jennifer Martinez from our communications office will introduce him or her.
Yeah. Are you able to see Elena?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Odds are it's a pit bull.
She is a kitty.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
We've had pit bulls 5 weeks in a row.
Okay, there we go. Doing this several weeks in a row, and somehow I forget to hit share screen, but I think I'm on track now. Okay, and you're able to see her now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am Jennifer Martinez with the city's communications office, and today I would like to introduce you to Elena. You can take Summer everywhere you go. When you adopt Elena, her warm, attentive personality will allow you to make memories that will last forever. She is sure to shower you with hugs and kisses and adoration, and all she needs in return is love, attention, and a forever home. You can meet Elena at the Animal Service Center of the Mesilla Valley. The hours of operation are Monday through Friday, noon to 6 p.m., and on Saturday and Sunday, noon to 5 p.m. Of course, you will need to call to make an appointment. The number is there on the bottom of your screen, 3820018. If you're looking for offsite adoption events, they are still canceled until further notice. But if you are looking to adopt, you can go onto the Animal Service website at ascmv.org/adoptions. The cost will be $25. You can look online for a pet that you might be interested in, and then call and make an appointment to actually go see that pet. Again, the number 3820018. Today, a reminder about being a responsible pet owner. We ask you select a pet that's suited to your home and lifestyle. You keep only the type and number of pets for which you can provide appropriate food, water, shelter, healthcare, and companionship. Commit to the relationship for the life of your pets, and also to remember to provide them with ID tags in case they do get lost. Well, the community's been working very hard to follow COVID safe practices, and because the conditions are improving, Parks and Rec is able to open up additional parks. Right now, playgrounds, restrooms, and water fountains do remain closed, but if you look at each district that is listed, the first item there are parks that have been open for at least a month, and then everything past that first park was opened as of Tuesday of last week. Guests are still asked to wear masks, to stay socially distant, and gather in groups of 10 people or less. And if you'd like to see more about what parks are open and what will be opening or have opened and what some of the restrictions are, you can go to los-cruces.org/COVID-19 parks schedule, and you can see all of the information listed on that website. Thank you so much, Mayor. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Jennifer. And now we're going to go to the jobs of the week, and Darlene Lopez from Workforce Solutions will tell us a little bit about those.
Mr. Mayor, it's actually going to be Francisco Payares.
Oh, it's going to be you.
With
Okay.
that.
Every time I call you, you give it to Darlene.
My apologies, Mr.
That's
Mayor.
okay, no problem.
Today is me.
Yeah, okay.
Good afternoon, Council. For today's jobs of the week, we're going to have, first of all, here the City of Las Cruces is currently hiring an engineering technician. This position is open until filled. The second position that we have available for today is the field service technician. They're still looking for someone at the Megahertz Computer Consulting, open until filled. One program specialist and one finance manager at the South Central Council of Governments, open until filled. One registered nurse and one custodian with Tresco, as well as they're looking for facilities and vehicle maintenance with South Central Regional Transit District, open until filled. For a full list of jobs and internships and volunteer opportunities, please visit employnm.com, or you can visit www.governmentjobs.com/careers/Las Cruces. Again, the information for New Mexico Workforce Connection, the phone number is 575-524-6250. They're located at 226 South Alameda Boulevard in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And again, that webpage for those employers that want to post jobs and those job seekers that want to seek for employment, employnm.com. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Payares. Appreciate that. Okay, now we're going to get to the agenda. We have three items on the agenda. 3.1 is the minimum wage adjustment. And Ms. Leanne Demouche will discuss this. And I'll just turn it over to Leanne.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor, councilors. Let me share my screen. Okay, do we have the full screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you, Mayor. I want to bring up my participants so that way I can see later on. Okay, today we are bringing the minimum wage adjustment. Just to give a little bit of background, especially for the newer counselors, Counselor Bencomo and Counselor Stuvey, the minimum wage ordinance is part of the municipal code that is Chapter 14 under human rights. It was actually, we changed the this particular code. It was exactly this day, September 14th, approximately 5 years ago, that we put in for a new ordinance for this code. And what it did was it implemented a phased increases of wages per hour and tipped wages at 40% of the minimum wage. And as you can see, they went into effect in 2015. The minimum wage was, this was a fixed amount in the ordinance, and it was $8.40. And then phasing it in again for 2017. Now this also, just backtrack a little bit, I apologize for this. These all go into effect on January 1 of 2015, and then again, January 1 of 2017. So it went from $8.40 to $9.20. And then in 2019, it phased into being $10.10. But then the ordinance also says that beginning January 1 of 2020, and on every January 1st of each year thereafter, the minimum wage provided under the ordinance shall be adjusted by the increase of the cost of living. And then the increase of the cost of living is to be calculated based on the percentage increase using the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, for August, which, by the way, just came out on Friday, September the 11th. This is why we're bringing this to you today, because we just got that information from the Labor Department. So what we do is we take, just to give you an idea of the calculation, we take the current CPI for August of 2020 minus the CPI for August of 2019, get that difference, and we get a percent increase. And for 2021, that percent increase is going to be 1%. So here we have in January 1 of 2020, when we calculated the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, we had an increase that went from 1010 to 1025. And that's where we are currently at, is the 1025. Now, also in 2019, the state adopted a new minimum wage as well, a new statute. And they implemented a minimum wage of $9 per hour. But since the city was at $10.25, we were able to keep with our ordinance because we were higher at that time than the state. So now we're moving in a few months, as you know, we're moving into calendar year 2021. So on January 1st, calculating the cost of living with the CPI for August, our ordinance adjustment for our minimum wage would be $10.40. The state is going from $9 per hour to $10.50. So what that means is that the city will need to adopt a minimum wage for the state because it is higher. Now, you also notice in that particular row, I also talk about the Hibbs Institute. Just to let Councilor Bencomo and Councilor Stuvey know, back in 2018 and again in 2019, we had contacted and had worked with, it's under UT Tyler, they're called the Hibbs Institute. And one of the things that the Hibbs Institute did for us, because the council was very interested in knowing what the impact analysis would be to the city's minimum wage ordinance on the people and these increases that we're having on the minimum wage as well. I do want to let you know that those two documents are on the city website if you'd like to view them. If you're unable to find them, I can send them to you directly. So moving forward for January 1st, just to give you an idea of how this moves on with the city and also with the state minimum wage, January 1 of 2021, the state will go from $10.50 to $11.50 per hour. Of course, our ordinance will be based on the cost of living or the CPI for August. Of course, we do not have that number. The Hibbs Institute, what their forecast was that we would go to $10.65. And then in January 1 of 2023, the state goes from $11.50 to $12 per hour. And our ordinance, of course, will be adjusted by the cost of living as well. And whatever is higher, the state or the city, we will adopt. Now, as far as the tipped employees, the city ordinance states that we will, that employers have to pay 40% of the minimum wage. The $4.20 that you see right there, that starts on January 1 of 2021 using the state minimum wage, which is the $10.50. Currently, the minimum wage for tip employees is $4.10. However, the state tipped employees currently right now, even though it says January 1 of 2021, it will not change. Tipped employees per the state are paid $2.35, and it will not change per their statute until January 1 of 2023, and it will go from $2.35 to $3 per hour. Now, we wanted to look at the potential effects of adopting the state minimum wage. Of course, the biggest one is the tipped workers. They will experience lower wages. So if you totally want to the state minimum wage, we would have to go down to the state fixed rate, which is $2.35. Where the city, if we kept with our ordinance, the city would be 40% of the minimum wage, which would be $4.20. Now, one of the other effects is that the state that does have a fixed rate schedule, it allows us for better planning. It allows us for better budgeting because we know exactly what it's going to be. It's not going to be based on the consumer price index, the growth rate. Just for knowledge, just to let you know that if we used, let's say, a 2% CPI growth rate, it would take the city approximately 9 years for our minimum wage ordinance to actually surpass the state minimum wage. So for discussion, we put two items up here. Of course, there's much more discussion if you'd like, whatever you would like to discuss after this. The two items that we wanted to make sure that you understood was that you can repeal our local ordinance and utilize the state minimum wage law. Or we can continue with our local ordinance, and every year on an annual basis, we can look at the hourly rate comparison and bring that to you, of course, every year to council. And we can look at what the difference is between the state and the city and adopt the higher. We also, if we continue with our local ordinance, we can continue applying the tipped wage formula on the hourly rate. Either use the state or, whichever one is higher, our local minimum wage. And with that, I wanted to let you know that I do have Dr. Pius on the line as well. He just talked a while ago. He helps me a lot with the minimum wage as well. And we have Joe Richards, which is our HR director, if you have any questions going towards HR. And of course, as always, we have our assistant city managers to help us out as well. And with that, I will turn it over for any questions or discussion.
Mayor, you're muted. Oh,
Sorry about that. Councilor Sorg, and then we have Councilor Flores.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Leanne DeMusha, for that impression of a presentation. So just to clarify this, last year, the minimum wage, the city ordinance minimum wage was $10.10. And because of the increase in CIP, it was raised to $10.25 this year. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilor Sorg, so in January 1 of 2019, we adopted the minimum wage was, let me go back to this slide. In 2019, the minimum wage was $10.10. And then using, for the first time, January 1 of 2020, using the cost of living or the CPI, it went from 10.10 to 10.25.
Okay, good. That was a little confusing to me. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe our ordinance says that the cost of living increase each year cannot exceed 3%. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilor Sorg, that is a really great question, sir. However, I went through the ordinance recently, and there is nowhere in the actual code that's for the Human Rights, Chapter 14, that talks about the maximum being 3%. That is something that maybe it was in one of the past ordinances, and it was part of the actual bed of the ordinance as a whereas, but it was never actually written into the municipal code. And it probably, if by guidance of the council, the mayor and the council, if that is something that we need to include into that municipal code, we need to add that, sir.
Yeah, it's funny because I distinctly remember seeing that it was up to a maximum of 3% somewhere. Okay, that's fine. Now I don't understand, you know, the state of New Mexico, the government in our state has so much control over the local governments, the municipalities, and even the counties. And it seems to me kind of strange that if the state government passes a minimum wage that is higher than the local minimum wage, why that wouldn't be the law? Why wouldn't that be the case where you would have to follow the state law before you would follow a city or local government? Can anyone on staff explain that to me? Why? Because you know, they control everything else we do. Why wouldn't this be in that same?
It does.
Yep, Mayor, Councilor Sorg, actually in the presentation, sir, and I apologize if I was a little confusing. Per our ordinance, our minimum wage would be $10.40. However, since the state is higher, which is $10.50, sir, we have to adopt the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Okay. I apologize.
So in other words, but if we need a new ordinance to do that?
Mayor, Councilor Sorg, my understanding is that we do not. I can ask our attorney, Jennifer Vega Brown, if she would like to comment on that. But my
in other words, take some action by the council.
You can, sir. We can actually, on one of the slides here, you can actually repeal our whole ordinance.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
But if we were in agreement with the state law or the state minimum wage, we wouldn't have to take any action, would we?
Mayor, Councilor Sorg, I believe not, but.
Okay. All right, then. Thank you. That's all I have for now, Mayor. We'll see how the discussion goes.
Okay, Councilor Flores and Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Mush and Dr. Payares. So I have questions about the tipped employees, and slide 4, I think, is where, let's see, let me get rid of this. So, so the state fixed is at 235, the city is 420, and can you explain bullet point the third bullet point at page 4? Using a 2% CPI growth rate, it will take approximately 9 years and so forth. Can you explain that, please? And
Sure,
what does that mean insofar as what do we have to do, or does that just fall on automatically?
So Mayor, Councilor Flores, it was just for knowledge. We were looking at, potential effects of adopting, if you adopt the state minimum wage. One of the things that Francisco and I were looking at is, as you can see, the minimum wage, the phases of the minimum wage are rather intense. I should maybe use the word intense, because they jump, right here, you've got a whole dollar. And so one of the things that Francisco and I were looking at is, if we continue using the consumer price index, the cost of living, our cost of living for January 1st of 2021, the difference was 1%. So if every year we increase our cost of living by only 1%, it's going to take the city, going in these very small phases, it will take the city quite a while to get to $12 per hour. That's all we were trying to say, ma'am.
But, so I don't know if Jennifer's on the line, but Leanne, doesn't that mean that we don't have to do anything? It's just an automatic thing that happens because of the state legislation, correct? I mean, it's basically the same question Councilor Sorg is asking, but so you just wanted us to see how long it would take to catch up?
Yes, ma'am. That was it.
Okay. But in fact, we don't have to pass any legislation, any local ordinance.
No, ma'am, you do not.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moose. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Welcome. Looks like we have Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everyone, thanks so much for that presentation, Leanne. Yes, I have a couple questions. Maybe we're belaboring this, but I'm unclear about the purpose or intention of repealing the local ordinance, and what would that do? Because, yeah, go ahead.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, one of the reasons that we just put that in there was that if you just wanted to adopt straight to the state, we could do so. It would clean up our own ordinance. It would clean up, you know, the chapter that we have in our municipal code, and just state in there that we're fully adopting the state. If you do want to adopt the state fully and redo the ordinance, then what will happen is the state fixed rate for the tipped would go into effect.
Right, so consequently, that would mean tipped folks who work on tipped wages, they would see a decrease in wages.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, that is correct.
Yeah.
Currently it's at 410, it would go from 410 to 235, but starting January 1st, it would go from 420 to 235.
Yeah, I personally, that doesn't sit well with me. And then my other question, Leanne, was what happens in 2024? So the city, the state, everyone is at 12. And then does our adjustments apply to the 12 or no? Does that make sense? My question?
Yes, Mayor, Councilor Bencomo. So what happens in January of 2024 is, I'm going to make an assumption here, especially towards the state, because they only took their statute to 2023.
Right.
So I'm making an assumption right here that in January 1 of 2024, they would just remain at $12. If we keep our ordinance, we continue looking at the CPI, we continue seeing what that increase would be for the cost of living. And that was one of the reasons why Francisco and I put in here for the effects, was just letting you know that if we keep our own ordinance, we would probably, it would take us 9 years to get to that $12.
Right. Okay. Those are all my questions, I think. I mean, so far right now, I have not heard anything that would make me feel like repealing is a good idea. But I'm glad we're having this conversation. I also, that's helpful. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, looks like we have Jennifer Vega Brown and Barbara De Leon both want to speak. I don't know. Barbara, did you have something you wanted to add that Jennifer wasn't going to add?
Yes, just briefly. Thank you, Mayor and Councilor Bencomo. To your question with respect to the impacts of adopting the state ordinance, I also wanted to note that besides the impact on the tipped workers, the impact of knowing what the hourly rate will be well in advance of the calculation that we have to do for CPI in this time frame would help businesses be able to plan for and budget for an increase. One of the concerns that's come up in the past about how our ordinance is written is, since we wait for the August CPI to come out, as Leanne said, it doesn't get released until September. We do the calculation and then send out all the notifications in October for a January implementation. That's not a lot of time for businesses to be able to plan for and react and set aside funds, et cetera, for that increase. And so that's one of the things that the state, because they do have a fixed table for the hourly rate, businesses would know well in advance what it would be in each subsequent January time period. So I just wanted to make that note.
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. For sure. I totally get that piece of matter of convenience. I think it's a big deal. And, rent, groceries, those things don't have a fixed rate, right? And those things continue to go up. And so I think we should be mindful of that as well.
Thank you.
And Jennifer Vega Brown, do you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Bencomo. just so that you are aware, you don't have to adopt the entire state statute. You could adopt the state statute in parts. So if you wanted to keep the higher tipped rate, you could still have your the city ordinance that would maintain the higher tipped rate. If you wanted to be consistent with the state and everything else, you could do that. So it's not an all or nothing. You can do whatever portion of that you'd like.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So let me just chime in real quick before I get to Councilors Beta, Stuvey, and Sword. You know, we don't have the business owners here typically in work sessions, but I will tell you this. I researched, because I do know that the restaurant people were able to come to an agreement with the governor's office on the minimum wage. And what I couldn't understand was why was it that they were okay at the state, but there was concerns here with ours locally? And what I was going to say, and let me just throw this out to Jennifer or Barbara, I'm pretty sure that if we were to, let's just say, go with the state for a year, and then we could always go back and implement this, the city's portion of the minimum wage for tip workers. And let me just tell you why. Because I found out that the reason why that the restaurant workers, especially the Restaurant Association, agreed to the first one is because of that 235. And so if I'm not mistaken, even if you had a person with terrible whatever and didn't get very many tips, they're still guaranteed the $10.50 an hour, no matter what, even at that state rate. And all I was going to ask, and just for council to consider, especially with COVID right now, I mean, restaurants are literally on life support. And for them, if we could drop to the state rate at $10.50 an hour and with this fixed rate at $235, I think it would be extremely welcomed. And then after about a year, after hopefully the vaccine comes through and things start returning back to a little bit of normalcy, then go back to the city increase in minimum wage. That is something that I think we could do. Isn't that correct, Jennifer or Barbara?
Yes, Mayor. This is Jennifer. Yes, that's correct.
So again, I just wanted to throw that out there. And I'm going to turn now to Councilor Beta, Stuvey, and Councilor Sword.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Leanne. A couple of the questions I had were answered by Jennifer just a minute ago, but I did want to ask, how long have we had the tipped wages with the minimum wage of $4.20?
Mayor, Councilor Stuvey, I went back and looked at the original ordinance that we had, and it started with that original ordinance back in 2015.
Okay, so they've been at this. And I will say, you know, I look at the different restaurant groups that they have trying to support, as we think a lot of us that can have been trying to eat out a little bit more often, helping. One of the comments that I often see on those are make sure to tip your server, your helper. We're seeing that, you know, it's still a bit of a problem with that. I'd be hesitant to drop that by $2. I know as a server, I worked as a server for a very, very long time, and you do not see a check coming in at $2.35, or you see cents, and that's it. And so you're very reliant on their tips, which have gone down based upon everything from just hours, number of people you can serve, those types of deals. So to even drop that, I'm just hesitant, and I would love to see and hear from servers right now. What is it looking like during this time of COVID? What types of tips are they receiving? What does that look like for them? So that's, I think, a conversation that we should look into. With that,
Councilor Beta, Stuvey, if I may interrupt, and just for clarification from Barbara or Jennifer. So, and this is one thing that I wasn't aware of until recently. So let's say you do have a server, and let's say they do great they do great work, and maybe they get, I know this might be a lot, but let's just say hypothetically, they get $10 a family or whatever, and let's say they do 3 of them, so that's $30. They still get that $4.20 an hour, even though they're way above the minimum wage. Okay, so that's the difference between that versus the state. So even under the state, they still get the $2.35 an hour, even though their wages are well above minimum wage, above the $10.50. See, I didn't realize it. I thought that this $4.20 an hour was like their minimum wage. Even if they got, $3 or $4 in tips, well, that's what they got. But no, it's that they get that $4.20 regardless. And that's what I was trying to get at. If council was to, for this 1 year only, drop to the state fixed rate at $2.35, they're still guaranteed the minimum wage. Restaurants are doing everything they can to stay open. And this is a small bit of a relief that I think council could show to those restaurant owners. That's all I'm trying to get at. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I don't know if you knew that. I didn't know that they still got the $4.20 an hour. That's all I was trying to do.
So I think we need to make sure that it's a relief, that when we make these, it's also a relief for the workers too. Like I said, I'm just hesitant if it's going to drop their wages as well. I mean, they're reliant on that. And it is with, I know that both parties, the restaurant owners rely on the workers and vice versa. But I just think that is a conversation that needs to be had, or there needs to be some sort of guarantee that those workers will at least be able to maintain as then the regular minimum wage then at least.
Well, no, they do get the minimum wage.
Yeah.
I mean, but I'm just saying, Counselor, is I think this is gonna, things are gonna get really serious here in the next 2 months. There's no relief coming in from Congress. And at least, in fact, at our finance committee, we discussed this. At least we knew the last 2 months. That's why our gross receipts tax from the state have been okay. It's actually been pretty good. But the next 2 months is what we're really going to see, because now there's no relief. Now you've got, it's going to get really difficult. And okay, what if we do it for 6 months? And just to see, because I really think that business owners are going to weigh whether or not it's even worth staying open. Now you've got an employee who has no job. You know what I'm trying to get at? So anyways, those are my thoughts. And I don't mean to cut you off, but Barbara has her hand up. Barbara De Leon.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Councilor Abeyta-Stube. I just wanted to clarify something. Councilor Abeyta-Stube, you asked how long the tipped wage rate had been at $4.20. And I just want to clarify that is the rate that we will be going to in January 2021. It has not been at that rate since the inception of the ordinance. It has been set at 40% of whatever the bill rate is. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Okay, thank you. And the base, it's just the 40%. We don't have like a base rate like they do in the state?
Yes, we do, but our rate is calculated every year based on the CPI. And so that's why there's a variation. It's not a fixed rate as in the state's statute.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. And, just if we were to, Mayor, if we were to continue that conversation further about changing those rates, I think we just need to be very specific in our language to make sure that the workers are protected as well. I think that's all my comments for now, but thank you.
Yeah, well, they would be guaranteed at least $10.50 an hour, which I think when this was first passed, that was the whole basis behind it. But again, that's just something to think about. We could make it effective on July 1. It goes to the $4.20 an hour. I just think that, or June 1st, of 2021. I just think that this is just a small opportunity to help our restaurant worker owners and everybody really. This is a team effort. It's a team suffering. I mean, the owners are suffering. Everyone. It's just very difficult for them. And to add on to this at this time is no different than when council delayed increasing the water rates or trash rates. You know, I mean, it just wasn't a good time. It's not a good time now. That's all. Councilor Sword, and then Mayor Pro Tem Gunda.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's three things going on here. You have the basic minimum wage. That's pretty easy to understand. You have the CPI, which adds another layer of understanding to this whole wage and income wage, minimum wage, the tip employees. Let me explain what I was told one time, and nobody's corrected me, and I said I'm wrong. And that is that a restaurant owner pays the waiter or the server a basic amount. Well, we're proposing it to be $4.20 next year. And it's been going up because the minimum wage has been going up because it's a percentage of the minimum wage. Well, what happens is that that's what the restaurant owner pays the servers, but the servers get tips, and those tips, if they don't reach the full minimum wage of, in the case of next year, what was it, $10.50 or $10.40, whatever, then the restaurant owner has to make up the difference so that that server gets the full minimum wage. But as the mayor says, more often than not, the server does get enough tips to push them up to that minimum wage or more. So they always should be getting. Now, does that mean that all restaurant owners are good and do that? No, of course, there's some cheaters. And of course, that's what I would like to correct. But anyway, getting back to the next part, the CPI, I just like to ask if we don't do nothing and we allow the state to dictate our minimum wage in Las Cruces, we still have that CPI. Would that go into effect on the state minimum wage too in the future? Not this coming year, but the year beyond?
No, just stays on ours.
Okay, so if we wanted the CPI, we would have to modify our minimum wage ordinance to add that to it if we wanted to have that as part of it, right?
Correct. Yes.
Correct. Okay. That's what I was wondering. Let me put my glasses on. I might have missed something. No, that covers it, I think. That'll be it, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Next is Mayor Pro Tem Gunda.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Leanne, for the presentation and the thoughtful and considerate remarks and questions of council. I understand it's very difficult for everybody, but I have a hard time believing that it's not more difficult for workers, especially tip workers, especially when it depends on, okay, what are they getting currently? 3 something, 2 something, 220, Leanne?
Mayor, Councilor Ganda, they're getting 410. As far as the 40%, they're getting 40% of the 1025, which is 410 currently.
410.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So 420?
No, they're getting $4.10 an hour right now, plus
410.
plus their tips.
Plus their tips, that has to equal the current minimum wage.
No, they get $4.10
Yes,
an hour.
Mayor.
They get $4.10 an
Yes.
hour, and it doesn't have to equal. I mean, if they get more, then they get to keep more.
No, Mayor, they do not get 10.25
in addition to the 410. I think
if they were to make $20 an hour, say in tips, they still get the $4.10 an hour. So they end up making $24 an hour and 20 cents. If they average $20 an hour in tips, let's just say hypothetically, they still get the $4.20 an hour too. Probably more than some of the business owners are making, probably netting right now, because it's difficult. It's very difficult right now. I'm just saying
it's difficult for those low wage earners as well.
$24 an hour that's higher than any, maybe only one of my employees I pay $25 an hour. That's $24.20 is pretty good wage. You guys have no idea what it takes to run a business. You don't. To my knowledge, very few of you have been in business for yourselves. It's hard to make that payroll. And it's very difficult. Well, good. The ones that are raising your hand, I hope to get your support on this because I think they need it. This is the time they need us. 6 months is not going to hurt. It's got, this I'm telling you, these next 2 months are going to be very, very difficult. They have nothing. Nobody has anything. Even the business owners, the PPP is gone. The EIDL loan, they're done. Everything's done. It's just a challenge. So Mayor Pro Tem, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sure you still
You
have
did
more
cut me off, Mayor. I thought it was rude and disrespectful because I'm trying
I apologize.
to understand this and trying to hear what you have to say, and respectfully, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I understand the frustration and the how overwhelmed everybody is, not just the businesses, the workers too. And I want you to acknowledge that this is difficult for the workers as well. And I don't feel there's that kind of acknowledgement. And I didn't know why you argued the point with me. I'm not arguing with you. I agree. And so I think that I would like to either a work group with workers and business owners to that would be my recommendation, is put a work group together. And honestly, I'm not sure how many business owners wouldn't overpower workers' concerns. I think they need to be separate. Because I've heard over the past how difficult it can be to talk about this. I mean, we've been right in the middle of it, and people are hateful, rude, disrespectful, and in fact, workers feel very voiceless, that they don't have a voice in this. And I just want to make sure that we are doing what we need to do to help everybody out. And maybe we need to write our federal delegation to assist our businesses in pushing to have the PPE and other assistance. Maybe that's another recommendation. That's all. Thank you.
No, I think your suggestion about a work session, whether it's business owners separately and employees separately, I think that's a great idea. I honestly, I don't think we can try, but I don't think there's appetite for Congress to help out any more than what they've done, to my knowledge. But we can try. It doesn't hurt to try. Councilor Bencomo.
Thanks, Mayor. My immigrant parents are business owners. Their livelihood depends on their small business. So I get that tensions are high, and I get that it has been such a scary year and it's not even over yet. But there is no reason to get personal. And I'm really disappointed in your reaction, Mayor. I think it's irresponsible to try to flare up a narrative that doesn't need to exist. When you said it at the beginning, this is a team effort. We got to figure out how to support each other. And low-wage workers are also on life support, very much. And, I think let's find solutions and ways to support our small business community that isn't on the backs of workers. I definitely think we should talk about how we're going to figure out grants. We have done so much more than the federal government. The federal government abandoned our communities, and this city has stepped up. And I think we can continue to step up without throwing anybody under the bus, small businesses or low wage workers. So I think we just need to be responsible. We need to have wider conversations with a lot of folks. And I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. I think a lot of workers often don't speak up for fear of retaliation, for fear that they'll be fired. And those are really, really real. And I think we need to take those things into consideration and really figure out how to support small business that doesn't mean taking wages away from low wage workers. And the fact that some servers are making perhaps maybe $24 an hour, great. Why would we want to take that away from them? I don't want to take a living wage away from someone who's living comfortably off that wage, right? The fact that it is not a sign of a healthy economy when a worker is making more on unemployment than by their regular job. That is not a healthy sign of an economy, and we should fight against that at all costs. So I am absolutely happy to have a bigger conversation about how we actually support both small business and workers, but I just don't believe that lowering wages is helpful for anybody.
Okay, thank you. No, I'm glad to hear that you're willing to support that work group. I think that would be great. All I'm suggesting is the business owners are in for a tough time. And if this is an opportunity to help, whether it's a 6-month relief, would be yet another way to help out. I understand where you all are coming from, but I'm just saying that this is if the economy, if we weren't suffering through COVID-19, yeah, okay, I understand that. But this is what our reality is. And you drive by the restaurants. I mean, I drive by certain ones. I mean, I don't know how they're still up and standing. They've got to mortgage everything that they've got. They had to, I don't know. They're probably on credit cards. I have no idea what they're doing. But, it's if you had the same, never mind. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a tough one, and I, totally understand your point of view, and totally understand what Mayor Pro Tem has said. All that notwithstanding, what you're proposing is something that would go into effect in January and would last for 6 months. Is that what I'm understanding, or would it go into effect immediately?
No, January, 6 months.
Okay, January, and then you're saying 6 months.
Yeah. Because just to reiterate, because that's what the Restaurant Association people, the state one, they negotiated this $2.35 an hour. And see, I didn't realize that. I'd see the 420, but then when I reached out to Secretary McCamley, he explained it to me. Yeah. Because I didn't understand how the Restaurant Associations in Santa Fe, when that law was passed, got their support, and why our restaurant people were against it. Well, okay, or against ours. And there's the difference. It's $2. It's almost $2 an hour more.
Wait a minute. We right now are paying $4.20.
$4.10.
Excuse me. I keep saying $4.20. Yes, $4.10. I crossed that out, and here I go again. $4.10. So you're talking about $1.65 or 75 cents, bringing it.
$85.
Okay, $1.85. And that would be for 6 months. And it would be a definite begin time and stop time. But by the same token, see, this is our, we're probably at the end of the year now. Yeah, we're at the end of the year. But with COVID the way it is, I just don't see how it's, I don't think it's going to change in 6 months. And I think that, I think we've had so much upheaval already between businesses and employees that somehow I'd rather leave it the way it is now, because yeah, we're higher than the state minimum wage for servers, for tip workers. But it seems to me that we'd be better off just leaving it as is.
And Counselor, the reason why I said 6 months is hopefully hopefully November, December, January, that vaccine will be out. I can tell you this much, until that vaccine comes out, I haven't gone inside a restaurant. I mean, we'll get stuff to go, but I'm not going inside. You know, that's why I would rather go outside. And hopefully by then, you know, maybe say a third are vaccinated. Maybe now they'll start picking up, things will start picking up. That's all I'm trying to suggest. Is you know,
yeah, I understand this. Yeah, and then looking at the time of year, it's been easy for some people. I too have not. I ate at an outdoor restaurant in Belgrade, but that was about it. I haven't eaten out at all.
Even a 4-month would probably help to go
okay.
to April 1st, you know, something just to get over that wintertime.
Yeah, that's exactly. You know? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking that it'll be the winter months, and so there's going to be less of a chance of people eating outdoors because of the cold weather. It's still a tough call. And now, on the other hand, I know that when this whole thing was being kicked around before COVID, and I asked servers, I asked how they felt about the minimum wage and how they, you know, what they preferred. Would they prefer to go at the minimum wage hourly, or would they like to stay the way they are? Because there was a discussion in that regard as well. And they hands down said, no, we want to stay as tip workers because we make a lot more money that way. But that scenario has changed because we don't have as many people eating out. So I don't know, it's a real toss-up for me. I'm not sure it's going to help to have anybody to have a work session and have people speak on behalf of their interests. And one of the problems that I foresee is that horrible, almost hate that spews from the business community. And there's another word I could think of, but it just spews. And it's so, and it isn't a question of not being sympathetic to businesses, especially in this era of COVID and how much they are suffering. But somehow reopening that conversation at this time, I almost don't want to be a part of it. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I still don't know how I would go on this, but anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, Councilor Flores, thank you for that. I mean, typically, if this was open forum, I would think that we'd have both sides at our council chambers to, and you know me, I would probably open it up to at least listen to them. So what Councilors Bencomo and Gondara are suggesting, I don't have a problem with. I mean, it doesn't hurt to at least hear what they have to say, both business owners separately. I like it separate, you know, that way they don't pit one against the other. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's actually something that we probably owe it to both sides to hear, to just hear exactly. So you want to at least, let's try to schedule something soon and just hold off on this as to which direction to go after we had a chance to at least listen to the both sides. Mayor Pro Tem and Leanne. Leanne, you had something?
Yes, Mayor, I just wanted to remind the mayor and council that actually in the ordinance, it states that we have to advertise the minimum wage by October the 15th on our website. So I just want to, you know, there's a timeline in here as well, sir. So I just wanted to let you know about that.
You can't advertise both, just in case? You're advertising it. You could just say the council can consider either one, but I don't know. That's probably a legal question.
Yeah, I'm unsure, Mayor. I can ask our city attorney, Jennifer Vega Brown, to maybe weigh in on that, or Barbara as well.
But I think we could probably get this done before the 15th. I think so. I don't think it'd be that difficult. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think there needs to be varied ways that we're going to get this information. I know that we're used to having these open forums in council chambers, but I believe that staff is ready to start allowing folks to come into these Zoom meetings pretty well protected, right? So we could do something organized with the business community and then something organized with the workers, but also an opportunity to do a survey of sorts. It doesn't have to be, Zoom-like, but also in addition, having a survey that with open-ended questions that could get folks talking about what this would look like moving forward. Again, I'm not in opposition of the possibility of prolonging this. I think we all should consider some of this, but I deeply believe that we should listen to the folks that are most affected. And again, I feel like it's our workers and our business community. Thanks, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. How about the 23rd? I know I can probably do something in the morning, or I can probably do something the 22nd in the evening of September. You want me to just have Annette check with you all schedules?
Which member?
I said either the evening of the 22nd or the morning of the 23rd.
Which month?
Oh, this month.
Okay, September.
Okay, I'll just get with Annette and we'll see what you all have. Okay, Leanne, anything else?
No, Mayor, Councilor, so as far as moving forward, we will just wait until after the possible meeting on the 22nd and the 23rd?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor.
Could I just request something from staff that they present this in a very understandable way? What the situation is with tipped wages. Because I don't think this presentation really made it very clear how you explained it quite a bit, and I think the rest of us got in, but I'd like to see it written out on a slide.
You mean like some examples about regardless of, as long as your wages, as long as your tips exceed the minimum wage, you get to keep whatever wages you get plus the minimum, plus the hourly wage. But if you should get less, then the employer is required to hit a certain level. So you basically want some pictures, something to show.
Well, yeah, but I could have it explained.
Yeah, no, I got you.
Anybody could understand it.
Like I'm telling you, I didn't realize that until I had to find out what was it that caused them to support it at that level statewide and why they were not supportive of the cities.
Yeah, there's a big difference.
Oh yeah, it's huge. Okay, thank you, appreciate it. All right, so next item is going to be the Anti-Donation Open Meetings Act and Ethics. Jennifer Vega Brown, City Attorney, is going to be discussing.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about some issues that a lot of elected officials and appointed officials have to deal with almost on a daily basis. I want you to be aware that our Planning and Zoning Commission is in attendance today. Our members of our Oversight Committee are in attendance, and all the chairs of the boards and commissions were also asked to log in today so that they could have this information. This is a series of informational presentations that the legal department will provide to all of our elected and appointed officials. And it's only meant to be an overview. We can certainly go in more depth later in smaller groups, but today that's what we're just going to do an overview. So anytime we talk about the obligation to act or the prohibition against certain acts, I want to begin with.
Oh, Jennifer, we can't hear you. Looks like you cut out.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. It says that my internet connection is unstable. I'm in my office, but we'll just see how this goes. If Rob needs to take over, that's okay too.
Okay.
So we'll begin with our constitutional authority. The city derives its home rule authority from Article 10 of the New Mexico Constitution. The Constitution allows that a municipality which adopts a charter may exercise all legislative powers and perform all functions not expressly denied by general law or charter. And the purpose of that section is to provide for maximum local self-government. The statutory authority is found in Chapter 3 of the New Mexico Statutes Annotated. Chapter 3 governs all municipalities, and there are many sections of that chapter. I would encourage you to peruse that section. Mostly that what we're concerned with right now are Chapter 3-15-1, which is the Municipal Charter Act. That gives us, the city, the authority to have a charter and to be self-governing. And then we have our charter. So we have the New Mexico Constitution, state statute, and then our charter authority. And our charter allows us to be a municipal corporation. We are a body corporate and public, and we may exercise all legislative powers and perform all functions not expressly denied by general law or charter. And again, it restates what the New Mexico Constitution states, is that the purpose of the charter is to provide for maximum self-government. And then finally, we have our municipal code. Section 1-4 is where we exercise our home rule powers. And that section states that this code is an exercise of the home rule powers grounded by Article 10, Section 6 of the state constitution and Section 1.0 of the city charter. So with all of that, that is where the city council gets its authority to act. So some of the most common laws and issues affecting elected and appointed officials are the New Mexico Open Meetings Act, otherwise known as the OMA, the anti-donation clause of the New Mexico Constitution. That's something that we often discuss and talk about. And then there are some ethical considerations such as conflicts of interest and ex parte communications. And then we'll also go over some of the City of Las Cruces ethics ordinance. So we'll begin with the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act is also known as the Sunshine Law. This is found in State Statute 10-15-1. The Sunshine Laws require that public business be conducted in full public view, that actions of public bodies be taken openly, and that deliberations of public bodies be open to the public. All meetings of a quorum of members of any board, commission, administrative, adjudicatory body, or other policymaking body are declared to be public meetings, open to the public unless the law specifically allows an exception. Open meetings are required when formulating public policy, developing personnel rules, regulations, or ordinances, and discussion of public business. This also means taking any action within the authority of any board or commission. The OMA requires that boards, committees, and other bodies that make recommendations to the public body must also comply with the OMA. So for example, our policy review committees, those are required to comply, and we do comply with OMA for all of our policy review committees. The OMA prohibits members of the public body from conferring privately during meetings by passing notes, sending emails or texts, or other means. Members of the public are generally permitted to record or videotape proceedings. The OMA does not require the public body to allow members of the public to speak at its meetings. This is probably one of the most confusing to the public. The chair of the meeting has within their discretion to allow public comment. So public comment is not something that is required by the OMA. That is something that's come up quite a bit during our COVID situation with all of our Zoom meetings. The notice requirements under the OMA include an agenda with a list of specific items of business to be discussed or information on how the public can obtain an agenda. That's very important. It has to list the specific items to be discussed. It cannot be general items. And except in an emergency, we have to publicize 72 hours in advance notice of the agenda, and it has to be posted on the public body's website. And only the items on the posted agenda are permitted to be discussed at the public meeting. Currently, our city clerk is in charge of this very important responsibility and publishes notices for all of our boards and commissions, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Christine, is about 30.
It's about 42, Jennifer.
Thank you. 42.
You're welcome.
We're required by the OMA to keep meeting minutes. The board, commission, or other policymaking body shall keep written minutes of all meetings. At a minimum, the minutes must include the date, time, and place of the meeting, the names of members in attendance and those absent, the substance of the proposals considered, a record of any decisions and votes taken that show how each member voted. The minutes are subject to public inspection, and the draft minutes must be prepared within 10 working days after the meeting and shall be approved, amended, or disapproved at the next meeting where a quorum is present. And as you know, that you approve the meeting minutes from your previous meeting at every meeting. The OMA's requirement for public meeting applies to any discussion of public business among a quorum of a public body's members. A quorum may exist even when the members are not physically present together at the same time and place. This is something that I know the City Council is always aware of. You speak of it many times, and what I'm talking about is the rolling quorum. The Attorney General gives the following example in their compliance guidance, which is also available online. If 3 members of a 5-member board discuss business in a series of phone calls or email conversations, that discussion is a meeting of a quorum. I think we've all talked about this previously also as it relates to our policy review committees. You also have to be very careful that outside of those meetings, you are aware of who you're talking to and who has commented on the subject at hand. Rolling quorums are a violation because they are not properly noticed public meetings. This is a quote from one of the guiding cases in this area. The public business is the public business is the public's business. The people have the right to know. Freedom of information about public records and proceedings is their just heritage. Citizens must have the legal right to investigate the conduct of their affairs. Another case that governs this area is from Gutierrez versus City of Albuquerque. This is from 1981. The Arizona Supreme Court, examining a statute quite similar in language to our section 1015.1, stated that the intent of the legislature was to open the conduct of the business of government to the scrutiny of the public and to ban decision-making in secret. A meeting held in the spirit of this enunciated policy is a valid meeting. We're going to jump right into anti-donation unless anybody has any questions about the OMA right now. Anti-donation is one of those things that is difficult in New Mexico. There's no bright line rule. There's a lot of gray area. We have some attorney general opinions and other opinions, but I think, as everybody knows, we wish that the legislature would be more definitive in how it's defined. The New Mexico Constitution strictly prohibits donations to individuals by governmental entities. The provision provides in pertinent part, neither the state nor county, school district, or municipality, except as otherwise provided for in the Constitution, shall directly or indirectly lend or pledge its credit or make any donation to or in aid of any person, association, or public or private corporation. This does include nonprofit. The law makes it clear that there are limitations on how public funds and assets can be used. The uses provided for in the Constitution are for the care and maintenance of sick and indigent persons, establishing a veteran scholarship program, a loan program for students of the healing arts, providing land, buildings, or facility infrastructures to support new or expanding businesses. These are very clearly statutorily defined, and providing for affordable housing. In a case that governs this area, Sena v. Trujillo, the Constitution makes no distinction as between donations, whether they be for a good cause or a questionable one. It prohibits them all. Only donations made for public purposes are permissible, such as expenditures for public purposes on public property. The sick and indigent exception does not permit the state or local government to make donations to private or nonprofit organizations that are used for the organization's operating expenses. That language is straight out of an AG opinion. Some examples that are shared through the AG's website are the New Mexico Supreme Court held that it is unconstitutional legislation that authorized counties and municipalities to provide financial aid to a nonprofit corporation formed to promote a statewide celebration. And no contributions to an American Legion memorial were allowed. A county could not contribute $500 to an American Legion War Memorial erected on county property. The city charter also addresses this. The city of Las Cruces, except as otherwise provided in the New Mexico Constitution, shall not directly or indirectly lend or pledge its credit or make any donation to or in aid of any person, association, or public or private corporation. Nothing herein shall be construed to prohibit the city from making provision for the care and maintenance of sick and indigent persons. I think we've discussed quite a bit our ability to assist in that particular area and our use of public funds for that particular area. And the city council has always been very careful about making sure that it is for the sick and indigent, and it doesn't have to be both. It can be the sick or indigent. So we'll go on to some ethical considerations, and these are just a few of the issues that have come up, or that always come up, just basic questions that we're generally always asked. A conflict of interest. So that term has been used before in government. When does a conflict of interest exist, and what exactly is a conflict of interest? The definition is that it exists when a person is involved in multiple interests, financial or otherwise, and serving one interest could involve working against the other. A conflict of interest may exist when a personal interest or organizational interest might adversely affect a duty to make a decision in the best interest of a third party. So a conflict of interest doesn't just extend to a financial conflict. It can extend into decision-making that are non-financial. A public official shall treat their government position as a public trust. The public official shall use the powers and resources of public office only to advance the public interest and not to obtain personal benefits or pursue private interests. Public officials shall conduct themselves in a manner that justifies the confidence placed in them by the people and maintain the integrity and ethically discharge the high responsibilities of public service. Those words are taken from your draft rules of procedure. All the city council over the past year has had the opportunity to review, and they're also used from the model rules and from state language. There's state statute that also further define conflicts of interest. So those will be incorporated in your rules of procedure that will hopefully be passed by resolution within the next month or so. What do you do when there is an identified conflict of interest? Full disclosure of a real or potential conflict of interest shall be a guiding principle for determining appropriate conduct. Reasonable efforts shall be made to avoid undue influence and abuse of office in public service. So it's not if there is an actual real conflict, it's up to the individual, if they believe they have a conflict, to disclose it, which has happened from time to time. You always have to remember that conflicts can be waived. It may be that one particular board member or council member might believe they could have a conflict, and once that it's disclosed, the rest of the membership may not believe that there's a conflict. So conflicts or potential conflicts can always be waived. As long as they're disclosed, that's the most important part. Another area that there has been a bit of some confusion, and we get some questions fairly regularly, are regarding ex parte communications. What is an ex parte communication? It is a direct or indirect communication with a party or their representative outside the presence of the other parties about a pending matter that deals with substantive matters or issues on the merits of the proceedings. It includes attachments to written communication or documents shown in connection with a presentation that deals with matters or issues on the merits of the proceedings. And it does not include communications regarding the status of a pending matter or providing administrative information. So anytime you are going to have to make a decision or a vote on anything, whether it be something that's pending before, for example, before the P&Z that could potentially come to the city council, or it's on any potential legislation that you have to determine, any kind of communication that you have regarding that could be considered an ex parte communication. But it doesn't include, if somebody calls you up as a city councilor and says, Counselor, can you please tell me what my next steps are at a P&Z? You can tell them what the administrative information is. You can tell them, well, you need to call Larry Nichols, for example, or you can call the city manager, and you need to have a hearing there, but that's what you need to do next. As long as you're not talking about the substance of what's going to be determined, just the process, that's completely acceptable. Okay, so now we're going to go into the city's ethics ordinance. So Rob Cabello is going to take over that part of the presentation.
Mayor, Council, this is Robert Cabello, an assistant attorney with the city. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so the ethics ordinance, which is in the municipal code, it's section 2.1 or 2-1 through 2022-15. And the purpose of it is to establish or create an enforceable objective standard with which to create a certain an ethics standard for all public officials. It applies to the governing body, so the council, the mayor, city manager, members of commissions, of boards, so the utilities board, the P&Z board, and it establishes a due process procedure for investigation of complaints. One thing you might notice is that it doesn't mention employees, and that's because employees, and many of you may already know this, their standards of ethics are guided by their personnel manual. Under Section 600 of the personnel manual, there's a bunch of work rules, and under Section 611, there's an ethics policy that I would say not mirrors, but say parallels a lot of the same requirements for public officials. Now, under 2.4, there is a section which, upon declaration of candidacy, an election, an appointment of elected officials, they have to provide, of course, their name, phone number, and an address, but also things like their professional license, their business license, their occupation. They have to provide information on the membership of any city boards, committees, commissions, if they're a director of a private or public corporation, including nonprofits. They have to disclose the nature of their financial interests in any business, and that business is defined as also nonprofits. On to the next slide. Next page. So under 2.4, there's also, and this is really important, 2.4D, the ordinance prohibits a retaliation against any public official for filing a complaint of an ethics violation. And retaliation in this case is very similar to it does for public employees. If an official complains that another official has violated the ethics policy, they cannot be removed, dismissed from their position just for the fact that they made a complaint. Now, under our ethics ordinance, again, it enumerates specifically the things that are prohibited, certain behaviors. So accepting or soliciting private benefits or gifts, with some exception, it's allowed to have receive a small non-pecuniary sort of a gift, so like a gift of cookies or something. An award from any sort of organization, since because they're awarding a public official for their positions they've taken, being a champion of this cause or that cause or interest. Personal representation. It's forbidden to be a personal representative of a business or organization or an interest that goes before the governing body. And so if you can't, for example, if you're an attorney and you're also a counselor, you can't be representing a business that has a contract going before city council. That should make it a little bit simple example. Now, disclosure of confidential information. Obviously, any public official would learn all kinds of confidential information about employees, about contracts, and various things that they come into their, by the nature of their position. They're forbidden to disclose that because it could harm the actual city or actually personnel, individuals. Now, use of city services. Obviously, this is a very general term. Obviously, public officials can use city services, but they can't use their position to get services from the city that other people that are not officials can't get. For example, obviously there are lots of city streets, and I think all of us benefit from them. However, a public official couldn't get, say, the Public Works Department to, make a pool for their backyard or something of that nature, or pave a dirt road in front of their house, that kind of thing.
We lost you, Robert.
But what is prohibited is sort of...
Robert, we lost you for about 2 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just go. So there, obviously, Jennifer has already provided a really good explanation of what conflict of interest is. But financial interests that are prohibited would be a sort of buying into a financial interest and not disclosing it, essentially a vendor that has a big contract going before the city. And if the vendor gets awarded the contract, then obviously they're going to make a large amount of profit. And the official has not disclosed the fact that they now have an interest in this business and in this contract. That's What's also forbidden is abuse of position. Now, abuse of position is kind of overlaps a number of these other concerns, but it's essentially using your position to get a benefit, either for yourself or somebody in your family, to basically get a benefit that a person not in your position could get. So, for example, how about real simple, getting a traffic ticket and saying, well, I'm a counselor, I really don't need to get a traffic ticket, that sort of thing. That's a real simple example, but it actually works. Interference with administration or by the administration. So, two different things. So the administration, in this case, it's referring to the city manager. Now, the city manager can't interfere with the debate or discussions that the councilors have and the mayor has regarding certain policies. And likewise, the city council and the mayor can't get involved that's in the administration of city business, such as personnel matters, those types of things. Next slide. Okay. Again, part of this big process was for this ordinance is to have an enumerated process. So if there is a complaint of a violation, there's an established process. The person that is being the target of the complaint has their due process rights to be able to respond. So the process begins when the complaint is filed with the city clerk. The city clerk will still refer to it to the external review council. The external review council will evaluate it, and if there's no merit in it, will make a written statement that it's basically dismissed and the reason why it's dismissed. If not, external review council will actually inform the target of the complaint of the nature of the complaint, giving them a chance to respond. Again, part of their due process rights. Now, the formal procedure will actually start when there's initiation of a specification of charges. And it's capitalized because that's really important. That's essentially like how a criminal case begins with an indictment or a summons. It'll enumerate specifically the types of things that the public official is alleged to have violated in the ordinance. And at that point, the respondent, the target of the complaint, will have an opportunity to respond to the specification of charges. Within about 30 days after the answer has been filed, there'll be an actual hearing. And the nature of the hearing will be an adversarial process, meaning it'll look similar to a criminal trial. There'll be sworn witnesses. The external review council will be the prosecutor. The board and chair shall act as the judge. Board members may ask questions as witnesses. There'll be a cross of witnesses, meaning they'll be cross-examined. And after about 10 days of the hearing, the parties will have an opportunity to file findings and conclusions, meaning statements as to, based on the evidence that was provided in the hearing, why they should prevail. And eventually the board shall submit their own findings and conclusions in the 30 to 60 days. From that point, there'll be an appointment from the board for a hearing panel, meaning not just after after that hearing, there'll be a hearing panel appointed to review the findings and conclusions of the actual ethics board. From there could actually be other steps where there's actually allowed to have briefs, like legal written arguments or oral arguments or both being made. And after those things are done, the submission of briefs and oral arguments, if they're there, they will actually come with a final opinion. And there's only three things that could happen: the dismissal of the charges or the complaint, there'll be a public reprimand or suspension. And from there, actually, there's even a further process, because this process could be reviewed also by the governing body if there's an appeal. Move on from there. Next slide. Yeah. Okay, so hotline. These are the numbers. Obviously, there's one for employees and one for public. The public to call if somebody suspects some sort of fraud or some sort of unethical behavior. They can call it in and stay anonymous if they feel like they feel they're concerned about retaliation of any sort. those are the numbers. Again, it's for public employees. It's for the public. It's for anybody. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Oh. Next slide. Thank you. So I think in the interest, we're trying to do some more follow-up training with IPRA, the Inspection of Public Records Act, and kind of how it's important, what becomes a public record and what's not. The elements of due process, because a number of certain, a number of public officials are in their capacity as on the boards and in the governing body, they will act as a quasi-judicial body, and people need to have their due process rights afforded. And so we will go over those rights in a different presentation later. And obviously, you can always contact Jennifer, the city attorney, if you have any questions about this or anything, other legal question. Questions, both for Jennifer or I?
Robert, can you go back to the slide with one more. That right there.
Yes.
So at the very bottom, it says interference with or by administration. So just to clarify, so a council member is allowed to contact a staff member as long as city manager and is aware of it. Not just an assistant manager, but the city manager needs to, because, you know, if you're talking with the ACM, copy the manager. If you're talking with the staff director, you copy the manager. Is that correct?
Mayor, council, that is that is correct.
Mayor and council, I'll just clarify, the interference with administration really has to do, it's really important that you realize that you can call city staff to get information and to talk about certain issues that are occurring. The interference with administration happens if somebody were to begin directing staff to do certain things. I think that's kind of a fine line, and I'll let the city manager jump in. But I think it's really important that you understand you can talk to city staff and ask questions and get information. That's an important aspect of it. It's just the directing of city staff.
Oh, no, I understand that. But I think in fairness, since we have a new city manager, I think in fairness to city managers, the office of city manager, anytime a council member speaks to a staff member, the manager needs to be notified, or preferably email. So there's some type of record, paper trail. I don't know why a council member needs to call directly to a director. I would think that it's sufficient to use an email and or go through the manager, and consequently the same vice versa. It would be highly unusual for a director to contact a council member. So you can send them an email, but always copy the manager. Is that correct?
Mayor and council, I'll defer to the city manager for how he desires for that to occur. But yes, that's been my experience in the past. Okay, and definitely not have any city employee contact a council member without the manager's knowledge. Yes? And again, Mayor and council, I will defer to the city manager for that. Okay, well, let me go to the council members here, and I'll let, and if Ifa wants to jump in later here, he can. We have Councilors Abeta-Stuvey, Bencomo, Flores, and Gandara. So, Councilor Abeta-Stuvey.
Thank you, Mayor. Along the lines, and thank you, Robert, and thank you, Jennifer, for this presentation. I'm actually very happy to see this and glad that we are doing this review. Along the lines of what Mayor was talking about, obviously, we all sat on different boards and PRCs. On my PRC, I have to interact with staff, and there is a bit of direction that has to go on with there. So I just want to make sure that it's clear and everything. Like I have to direct for an agenda to be made and sent out, and any types of communications that have to go through to allow items to be on the agenda. So I just want to check in to make sure that those types of communications technically could be directing with staff, but it is appropriate, I would say, for the board to make sure, as the chair, I need to make sure that things get on the agenda, that we are coordinating appropriately with staffing. I've been copying the upper management that was, when I was introduced to the board, that was assigned with it. But I'm just going to check in to make sure that those are still appropriate measures that can be taken.
Mayor and Council, this is Jennifer Vega Brown, your city attorney. I'll defer to the city manager on that. I certainly want to make sure that his wishes for that process are, those expectations are clear.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councilor Beta-Stuvey, can you repeat what your question was?
Yes. I was saying that as my position as a chair of different PRCs, I do interact with staff. With that in mind, technically, I would be directing, say there's items on the agenda and presentations that have to be called forth. When I request for those to be on there, that is a direction. And so I just want to be clear that that is considered appropriate items that can be done and is not prohibited.
Yeah, I mean, when what you're requesting is information to be done. Now, if you're telling them to do something and get it done and make that a policy of the council, then you've overstepped your bounds.
Okay, so for example, we're going to have a new policy that might come up. They need to look and get that a presentation to the PRC. Me requesting for that to be on our agenda and shown, is that overstepping?
No, not at all. Because that's information that eventually gets to the policymakers, which is the council. And then we'll, but if you were to unilaterally bypass that and which would be difficult to do, because I'm sure staff would say, hey, we can't do that. That's go before the board and get it passed. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and having staff do that in your role as a chairperson, that's totally acceptable.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you. I believe it was with our conflicts of interest around page 27 or slide 27 and 28. I'm really glad to see these items on here. I feel like I'm an oversharer when it comes to conflicts of interest. But that's because of that, not only real, but potential. And I do think that it's really big to have that disclosure out there. For me, I know that we have it as public officials, but I'm assuming, and staff has the same requirements for conflicts of interest. Is that correct, Jennifer? For disclosure?
Yes, Mayor and Council, this is Jennifer Vega Brown. Yes, the city staff has to follow our own ethics code, and yes, we would have to disclose any potential conflicts of interest.
Okay. Whenever we have, and for me, it's been anytime an item comes up and it's at my spouse's workplace, it has to deal with that, I've always disclosed. Is that something that we also, is that might be an overshare perhaps, but for me, it's a potential. I want to make sure that council can weigh in if they feel that that's appropriate or not. Do we have the same type of requirements then that are along that line with staffing if we have close connections? Because it is a small community and we are going to, have these issues pop up from time to time, I think.
Mayor and council, yes, the personnel rules are very clear on potential conflicts of interest. I think if in doubt, just disclose. If there's any question, just disclose it. I think that's a very good rule to go by more often than not. And what I've seen with this particular city council, they seem to be very conservative in your desire to disclose potential conflicts. And I don't think of the several that I've seen potential conflicts disclosed, I don't think there's been an actual conflict, but I think it's always better safe than sorry. For city staff, we didn't go through the process for ethics review of city staff. There is an internal review for that. There's an ethics committee. And so complaints are reviewed, and that it's kind of the same internal administrative process where there's a committee that reviews and a committee that will opine on whether or not a policy has been violated, but they're pretty much the same. It's not as broad as an elected or appointed official. I think it's a little more clear. It's a little more clear, and it's a financial conflict, or there's a possibility for nepotism or contracting, things like that. They're a little more specific, but yes, they should, and employees are expected to disclose.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is, who sits on the External Review Council?
Mayor and council, that's defined in the ordinance, and I've not seen that ordinance utilized since in the 3.5 years that I've been here. So I'll have to make sure that there is a committee, but I'm not really sure how that committee would function as far as the appointment. It hasn't been utilized. If it were to be utilized, we're very fortunate now because we have an oversight committee in place, so that's very helpful to us. But we have not received an outside sworn ethical complaint since I've been here. I'm not aware of one. I'd have to, somebody who's been here a lot longer than I have would have to chime into that, but I'm not aware of one.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor? Yes. David? Yes.
This is David Allen for the record. Can I hopefully address Councilor Beta-Stuve's information, because I was here when an ethics complaint was filed against a board member. So the complaint goes to the city clerk's office. It was a sworn notarized complaint. It was turned over from the city clerk's office. It's kept confidential to the city attorney. The city attorney hired outside counsel at that time. The reason it was listed as external counsel because the city attorney also works for the council, so that the city council. So that's why an outside counsel was hired. If the complaint had come to fruition, the ordinance is very specific, as I seem to recall, that the city clerk randomly selects 5 board members from the other city boards to serve as that board review committee, as the ethics enforcement committee, if it were to get to that point. In the complaint that I'm aware of, it was filed. The outside external counsel opined that it was not a conflict of interest, and so it didn't go anywhere at the time. So I hope that helps. But as City Attorney Vega Brown referenced, it's been quite a few years since, I mean, I was in 4 jobs, previous positions 4 times removed for me when that complaint was filed. So, thank you.
Thank you, David.
And there was another one filed in 2003. Got away with that one. Councilor Flores. Oh, Councilor Flores, you didn't have your hand up?
Well, I did have my hand up, but I had the same questions that and concerns that Councilor Beta-Stuve had. So thank you, Mr.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jennifer, for the presentation, and Robert. I appreciate this. I'm really looking forward to to really delving in on this, and this was a really good reminder for us. So I'm appreciative. Jennifer, does this conflict of interest pertain to board members like P&Z and Parks and Rec and all the other boards that we have to include our policy review committees?
Yes, Mayor and Council, this is Jennifer Vega Brown. Yes, it applies to all boards, commissions, appointed committees. It applies to everybody.
Okay, and I had the same kind of questions that Councilor Abeyta-Stuvey asked. So good job, Councilor Abeyta-Stuvey. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Como.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks so much, Jennifer and Robert. This was really good. I feel like I've gotten, obviously, as a new counselor, pieces of this here and there from you, actually, Jennifer, and then from the city manager's office, of course. And then, you know, Councilor Abeyta-Stuvey and I went to a training early on with the New Mexico Municipal League, but I have to say that this was significantly better and more in depth. And so I think it would be very good practice to start doing this every January after an election. I think feels really important for this information to just be known early on. I don't mind hearing it over and over, especially not in my first year. So I really appreciate it. I'm really curious, going back to anti-donation, I'm curious about, I feel like we've been talking about it so much and I've never asked in terms of the sick piece, because you know, Jennifer, you said sick or indigent. In what circumstance would the city provide aid, assistance, relief to someone who's sick? Or I guess I've never really thought fully in depth about what that means for the city, the sick piece.
Can I jump in on that real quick, Jennifer?
Sure.
So, Councilor Bencomo, that's a good question. And if you recall, in fact, I think it was in today's paper, La Gran Fiesta. This was one where it was my opinion, and I think, you know, this was when we waived a fee for them to use the downtown plaza, because if you stop and think about it, care only helps those with cancer. So they're all sick. They can't give it to no one else. They just don't give it to anyone. And so that is 100%. I mean, everyone who gets a recipient, to my knowledge, I mean, that's what they have in their charter, is sick. And that's why I've told others that, hey, if you give, you know, if that's what you do, okay, but this is the first of its kind. And my best wishes go out to Yoli and her family. So sorry to interrupt there, Jennifer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mayor.
Mayor and Council, thank you. Councilor Bencomo, was actually your comments about that you needed more in depth. That's why we put this together. So I'm glad that you liked it, and I'm glad we'll continue to add more to it. We could have had 100 slides very easily, but we'll just try to break it up into different presentations and print these out for you so that you can add them to that notebook that you have.
Did you have anything to add on the sick piece, Jennifer?
Well, thank you. So there are different things right now. For example, the funding that is being provided because of COVID. So currently the city is providing some of that funding as a result of COVID. I think Barbara DeLeon can speak probably more specifically to this, but that would be an example of the sick part of that. It's a result of a pandemic, and we are trying to provide care for in that arena. I think I'm trying to think of some of the mental health support that the city has provided. That would be another example of the sick portion of that. I can't think of anything else as far as the sick portion goes. It's mostly been in the realm of mental health care.
Would we be able to provide something we haven't discussed in our conversations with COVID relief packages is support for families who lost someone due to COVID, like funeral expenses? Is that possible?
Mayor and council, that's probably a bit of a stretch. We can look into it, but because it's not providing direct care to somebody who is sick or indigent, and the indigent part of it also has to be clearly defined on what constitutes indigency. We've normally gone by what the state statutes provide there. It's clearly defined, especially in the statute that provides for public defenders. We use that definition quite often.
Okay, thank you. What about in terms of natural disasters?
Mayor and council, it just depends on how that would be affected. I mean, there are many ways that could be affected. We have used this exception for anti-donation. I'm trying to think when for the asylum seekers, because it had to do with their safety and health and well-being. So there are ways that it'll fit under that exception. We just have to take it on a case-by-case basis, and it's very fact specific.
Okay, that's really helpful to understand. Moving on to a different topic, and I think I also want more clarification in terms of direction. I feel like sometimes I might have definitely have given direction during a public meeting. Is that overstepping?
Mayor and council, I will defer to the city manager on that. It has to do with how the city manager sees that portion of it. I mean, he's your employee and certainly has to establish what the expectations are. We'll follow his lead and certainly comply with whatever his expectations may be.
Okay, yeah, and I guess these are all perhaps even in some context new conversations, right? Because we have a new city manager. So I have been more intentional about, being specific towards, like, David, could you help me or whatever, right? Get this information. I just want to make sure people feel respected by me.
Councilor Ifo looks like he's on the.
Great.
Did you want to restate your question again to him?
Yeah, in terms of direction during a public meeting, whether a work session or a regular city council meeting, Ifo, what are you thinking in terms of how councilors should operate in that scenario with staff?
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. I don't have a problem, Councilor, with you giving direction. I'm in the meeting. It's in a public meeting. We're all together, and we're all hearing that direction. And so I don't have any problem with that. I'm your employee, and within that meeting, I'm also there to hear that direction.
Okay, great. I have a list of things for Jennifer. No, I'm just kidding. I don't, Jennifer. Thank you, Ifo. My last question is around, Robert, you actually brought up some stuff around the election and under the ethics piece. And I wondered about election law or election policy that's local, specific to Las Cruces. Certainly when I was running, I felt like it was lax. I didn't necessarily think there was, like it was somewhat lax. And so I'm curious about revisiting some of that, if Las Cruces has ever revisited election law, and if that's a conversation we potentially should have.
Mayor and council, if I may just jump in real quick before Rob addresses this. Just to for some clarification, Councilor Bencomo, I mean, I know you were kind of joking, you have a list of things for me, but I'm not like other directors.
Right.
Directly directly to city council. So you may give me whatever list you want, and I'm happy to do that because as you are my client, and that's a different type of responsibility.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer.
That you're aware.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
So obviously, we can revisit local election law. The city council did address some changes because of changes in the legislature on the local election act. Obviously, we've changed we have a different type of runoff. We have an automatic runoff now. We made changes to our charter. We actually put those up to the public. Most of I think like 6 out of the 7 changes were actually done. We proposed were actually approved by the public. So maybe not, and I'm not sure what questions, what local election stuff has been, you consider lax, but certainly we have made some changes. I think it was in 2018. I could be wrong about that year. But I did make a number of those ordinances and resolutions for that.
Yeah, I remember thinking of this early on after the election, but in terms of like the filing of paperwork, in terms of folks who turn it in on time and folks who don't, and like sometimes I wonder, like, if we're gonna have a rule, what is it there for if there are no consequences? That's a tough word and perhaps a harsh word, but I'm just curious about the follow-up of a rule that is in place.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, I understand, and I will look into, I guess, whatever laws that we have. Some of it is maybe affected by also the administrative process of the county, because they now have a big part of what we do,
right?
As far as our elections now. So I'll look into that, and I'll get with the city clerk and go from there.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert. I appreciate it. And that was my last question, Mayor. Thanks, everyone.
Councilor Bencomo, if I could just share with you what a wise council member once shared with me years ago on how to deal with the city manager. He told me, he says, if it doesn't involve money, it should be okay. Like, for example, let's say you have a constituent who they didn't get their garbage can picked up. Okay, tell the city manager, hey, you think you get that done? But if it involves money, like say purchasing a vehicle for some department, and you're trying to tell them to do that, then you're probably not. I think that's probably, and it's been a pretty good rule of thumb. If it involves purchasing something, then really council needs to get into it as a whole. Because if they go and buy another vehicle because you told them to, you know what I mean? And that makes sense, and I've always kind of used that rule of thumb, and it seems to have worked. And if it's something there that you do think that you really need to have it purchased and management is saying no, then bring it to us and we'll put it on the agenda and let the council decide. That's why, a few weeks back, I brought that other situation on the 50,000 check. This I've never seen, right? And I can't tell them to just pay that check. So just put it on the council and let you guys decide what you want to do with it. Okay, great. Anybody else? Okay, is that it, Jennifer and Robert, for this issue?
That is it for us. Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next one is the water and wastewater impact fees. Joe or Jose Provencio from Utilities will be discussing.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Councilor. Lila Walsh. I'll be talking on behalf of Mr. Provencio, Interim Utilities Director. We will be discussing the developmental impact fee study that was completed, as well as the allocation of those fees. So if you'll give me one moment, I'm going to share my screen. As you know, the developmental impact fee study has been completed by Tischler Bice. That means the recommendations have already considered all the infrastructure needs, as well as the impact to the systems and the financial demand of those impact fees. So you are going to see some rate changes on the development impact fee itself. But I do want to stress that This study is complete. What it is what it is. It's all pursuant to state law as well as our local ordinance. And these are the fees that our board, the Las Cruces Utilities Board, will implement. We are presenting today because, one, it is beneficial for the council to understand how these fees are used as well as what they are. And two, it is up to the council on how the fees are allocated, because that is done pursuant to council resolution. So the fees itself, we'll give a brief presentation, and Ms. Dominique Rodriguez, on behalf of Las Cruces Utilities, will start that and introduce our consultant. And then we'll turn it over to ACM David Dollahan to explain the allocation portion. So I will turn it over to Dominique. One moment.
Mayor, councilors, my name is Dominique Rodriguez. I'm the Rate and Economic Analysis Manager for Utilities, and I will be giving the beginning part of this presentation. So the first slide is the impact fee overview. The impact fee is a one-time payment for growth-related infrastructure. This cannot be used for operations, maintenance, or replacement. My slide is cut off a little bit. Okay. It is not a tax, but a land use regulation. 3 requirements must be met. 1 is need. Growth is creating a demand for system expansion. 2, benefit infrastructure gets built in a timely manner that expands capacity and contributes to system redundancy. Proportionate, new development pays its fair share. The historical timeline of the impact fees is December 19th, 1983, a resolution was passed where council adopts the initial development impact fees, or also known as DIF. On June 19th, 1993, ordinance was passed where council adopted and established the procedures for the assessment of water, wastewater, and park development impact fees pursuant to the New Mexico Development Fee Act of 1993. And then this is the timeline that we went through for this current study. On February 6, 2019, we entered into contract with Tischler Bice. On October 17, 2019, we presented the draft report to the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee, or CIAC. On December 19th, we went back to the CIAC and they approved the final water and wastewater impact fee update. We also presented the final report to the Las Cruces Utilities Board on January 9th, 2020. And we do have with us Julie Herlin. She's with Tischler Bice, and she will go through the next couple of slides.
Great. Thank you, Dominique. It's good to be with you, Mayor and councilors. Next slide, please. Okay, what you're looking at here is the updated proposed change in the water component, the water development impact fee. The amount highlighted in green on this slide indicates the updated proposed water fee of $2,125, and this is a one-time fee paid at the time of new development, hooking into the water system. The $2,125 is the base fee for a standard single-family detached unit using a meter size of either 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter. This reflects a decrease from the 2013 impact fee study. And the reasons for this is that the storage costs per gallon are somewhat lower than the 2019 impact fee study update. The current water development impact fee rate for a single family unit is shown here on this slide in the gray shaded cell. Next slide, please. This fee then is then calibrated to meter sizes, and that again is assessed at the time of platting and collected at time of building permit, and it is scaled to the base meter size of a 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter at that $2,125, and then based on usage scaled upward for by meter size. Next slide, please. And turning now to the wastewater portion of the development impact fee. This is a similar figure to the water, but this reflects the wastewater capacity charges, the development impact fee, again, scaled to a standard meter size for a single family detached unit. So the amount shown in green is the proposed updated wastewater development impact fee of $2,726 per unit. And this reflects an increase over the current rate shown in gray. And the reason for this is an increased cost factors for the components included in the fees, as well as an additional component of support facilities that are included in this fee update. Next slide, please. And then again, taking that the base development impact fee for wastewater and scaling it upward to capacity for wastewater usage or collection. The fee schedule is shown in the last three columns here on this slide by meter size.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Julie. Councilors, before we get into the allocation history, are there any questions regarding the development of the fee itself?
Doesn't look like.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mayor, in that case, we'll turn it over to ACM Dollahan.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, good afternoon. David Dollahan.
Hold on a second for just a second, Dave. I apologize. Mayor Pro Tem put her hand up. I don't know if she had a question for Delilah.
I do, Mayor. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my my pad there, my touch pad. So sorry. Thank you, Delilah and company, for the presentation. I read with interest as I'm longer on council. I'm getting more attuned to certain things, but I read the report that was done by, is that Julie? Yes, from the consultant. And I wanted to ask sort of the breakdown of the cost, right? Like 50% to the developer, 28 to the prospective resident, and then 22 to the base. Can you go back to that? Explain to me what the base.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, Tim, the actual base cost is the fee that Julie has presented, and then the breakdown, the 50%, 30%. This is what David's going to explain now, but that was developed by resolution through the council, and so David will give you that history here for discussion by council. But the base fee is a one-time fee, and the examples Julie gave were for a single family house essentially, that $2,100, and so that is the one-time base fee.
Yes, okay, and then I'll wait to hear his explanation, and then I'll ask the other questions. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Council, David Dollahan again for the record. I'm going to give you the history and potential options for council's consideration going forward on what we call the allocation of the impact fees. So first, this was adopted by resolution in 1995, and June 30th of that year. It was a couple of years after the new impact fee ordinance went in place in 1993. The council had previously rescinded previous development impact fees and adopted new charges pursuant to the new act for parks, water, and wastewater service. We now have impact fees for public safety. That was done in the 2000. Specific to water and wastewater residential only, it splits the development impact fee between the developers, the people that are building the house, the rate base. That's everybody else who pays in for the city utilities. That's who that is. Everybody who has a water bill or a wastewater bill collectively are known as the rate base. And then the end customers. That's how that is split. And that's been the direction from a city council resolution in 1995. Delilah, if you could move to the next screen. Some more information about the fees. It is assessed at the time of platting of the lot. That's when the subdivision or the individual lot is created. It's an assessment. That's when it is assessed. It is, however, collected for commercial accounts for a commercial business at the time they get their building permit. That is established in state law. The fee is assessed no earlier than the time of platting, and it can't be collected any earlier than the time it is permitted. It can be collected after the time of permitting, but it can't be collected before. For our commercial accounts, it's collected 100% from the developer at the time of getting their building permit. Their plans have been submitted, completely approved, and they're ready to start construction. We have it through the one-stop shop in coordination with utilities. They give us the fee amount, and that they write that check then. As for single-family residential accounts, the allocation is where that comes in. A portion is collected at the time of permitting. That's the developer's portion. And the remainder when a new residential account is set up for the utility services at the individual lot. A portion gets charged to the rate base, and then the remaining portion at the time they set up their new account is done to the end user. That's the person that's going to live or own the home and pay the utility bill. When utilities gets that information, it's proof of ownership or a copy of their ID is required. And then they also have the payment plan option is available to the residential customers. We charge interest for that, and it's over a 5-year period of time. Next slide, please. So this is how the fee is split and has been done that way for single-family development since the 1995 resolution. For water and wastewater both, 50% goes to the builder. That's at the time of building permit. The end user customer or the end use customer, the occupant and who's going to be paying the bill, for water pays 28%, and for wastewater, the customer pays 20%. For water, it's 22% to the rate base and 30% for wastewater. New development utilizes the increased capacity in extending and enhancing the system. System-wide fire flow, that's your fire hydrants and fire protection system, improves system redundancy, and service availability throughout the service area. The city has built in with its water system, primarily, that if we have a water outage due to a main break somewhere in the city, we have redundancy built in that the city wells are cross-connected. We have a well field both in the East Mesa and the West Mesa, and wells inside the interior portion of the city that are all cross-connected. That helps to ensure water outages are to a minimum, and that we have redundancy in the system for both fire protection and everyday water usage. Next slide, please. So this is to give you a little bit of history on the residential impact fees, how they're divided up. Between fiscal years 2015 and the current fiscal year 2020 that just ended, for single-family residential only, we had 2,361 customers who paid their impact fees in full without a payment plan. That means when the end user came into City Hall to sign up for their utilities, they paid their portion, either the 20% or the 28% of their impact fees outright. We have 4,700 plus almost 4,800 customers who are used the payment plan over the 5-year period to pay their portion of the development impact fees. Also, during this 5-year period, 2,500 plus customers that were previously on a payment plan paid off the remaining balance through when the fact that their property was sold or a title transfer occurred. We have a system in place that if anyone who signs up for a payment plan, if they sell their house within the 5-year period, when they go to sell or transfer the title, they have to pay off any remaining balance of the impact fee that was due on that plan. And then we also have almost 3,000 customers that are currently paying impact fees within that payment plan system. You'll notice these numbers vary across the 5-year period. Prior to 2015, we had people who were on payment plans before, and we put other people on payment plans now who've come through, who've recently gotten permits or have started their service. So that's a little bit of the history of the 5-year plan, and we can always come back to this slide if you need it. Next slide, please. So allocation options. You can continue with the current resolution, the current allocation established by the 1995 resolution. That's again on your left-hand slide. And you could also do other things. You could rescind and replace the resolution that would be different from the 95 resolution that allocates all of the development impact fee to the builder developer at the time of the permit. That means the whole thing has to be paid by the developer when they secure their permit. That's the $2,100 and the $2,700. You could allocate it differently between the end user, i.e. the homeowner, and the developer builder. That would still authorize the continuation of the use of the payment plan system that we have in place if you split it between the developer builder and the homeowner. Staff is aware that there were previous concerns expressed by some members of the council about the allocation, and that's why we presented these options to you. So with that, Mr. Mayor and members of council, I think that was our last slide, and I'll stand for questions and we're ready for discussion.
Thanks, David. Can you just share with us what concerns you were hearing from council on the current plan?
Mr. Mayor, previously, when we had a discussion on development impact fees, and I think it was in parks, Councilor Flores, and it was over a year ago, Councilor Flores expressed concerns about a percentage of the allocation being attributed to the rate base. That was where I was concerned. I don't want to speak for Councilor Flores, but the concern was that why isn't the end user or the developer builder paying for all of the impact fee, because they're the ones that are causing the need for the impact fee and the impact on the system to accommodate the growth in the new development.
Okay, thank you. Can you go back to the slide, I think, where you had the current and then the other one right there, please? No, right there.
13.
Right. Okay, so just to clear, no,
13.
the other one.
Sorry.
Right. No, the one 13, I think.
Slide 13. You went the wrong way. You're going the wrong way, Delilah.
There you go. So, right there. Okay,
it's
so
very sensitive, Mayor.
Oh, no problem. So just to clarify this, if let's say you're having a house purchased or built, the developer or builder usually pays half of the impact fees, and then the house is completed, and then when the person is finishing, the house is done, they have to get a few things, they have to go through the city. That's when they pay their portion of the impact fee.
Yes, sir, Mayor. That's when they sign up for final service in their name after the house is completed, okay. And that's the end use customer portion for both water and wastewater.
Correct. And then what you were almost giving the option to council is for the developer to pay that full amount upfront when they're starting to do the house.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. That's the full portion. That's the first bullet on the right-hand side. The options that staff were presenting, or I presented, I should say, is that we would not charge anything to the rate base. It would either go 100% to the builder, or it would be some form of split between the builder and the end-use customer.
But that's the way it is right now, isn't it?
No, sir, it is not. A portion of it goes to the rate base. Everybody who has a utility bill pays a portion of the water and wastewater impact fees for new development.
Okay, but I mean the end user, the customer, when they go pay the city bill, don't they pay the remaining 50%? And
No,
then
sir, Mr. Mayor,
you're
they
just saying they're only paying the 20%?
They're paying either the
Yeah.
28
Okay,
or
so
the 20%.
I think what you need to do, in my opinion, is let council know how much we're talking about, because I can tell you that I think right now it's been working. If you change that amount, not only are you going to have the customer really upset when they try to pay that bill to get their clearance or certificate of occupancy or whatever it is they got to get. Because that, I didn't realize, I thought they were paying already 50. If you're saying going up another 30% so the customer pays that, that's going to be really challenging. If you're suggesting that the builder pay 100% and charge to the customer, or however they do it, you know, now they're gonna finance that into their home, and that's going to really cause the the cost to be, if you were to spread it out over 30 years. So just out of curiosity, I mean, either way, they're getting the impact fees are being paid 100%. Why change it now, other than this, what you're talking about here? What's the rush to do that, or what's the reason?
It's just staff being responsive to a previously expressed concern. The portion to the rate base also is to the rate base. It's everyone else who's paying for it, who didn't necessarily cause it to have to be charged. Older development in their monthly bill pays it every month because it's a portion of their bill. It's a portion of the rate for water and wastewater. It is, I will tell you this, it is an administrative workload for staff on every one of these every time a new permit is pulled, and we split it between the rate base, the end customer, and the builder. I will also tell you, Mayor, that the homeowner ends up paying for this 50% plus 28 and 50 plus 20, because the builder passes along those fees to the end customer. No doubt about it, they do. Every time I've had a building permit,
sure,
I pay 100% of the fees.
I agree. I hear you. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think we need to, I think the best would be for council to see an example of the actual amounts, because, you have the percentages here, but I don't think they actually see what it really costs and how.
Mr. Mayor.
Really, yes.
Sorry, we have it outlined on one of the previous slides for both water and wastewater, and I'll go back to the water. Okay, slide 5, Delilah. Slide 5, this is the proposed charge currently on every single family home. $2,420 is split $1,210, $678, and $532. Under the new fee, it goes from $2,125, that would be split $1,063 to the builder, $595 to the customer, the end customer, and then the rate base pays $468. And then you have a similar for wastewater on slide 7, which is going up from $1,900 to $2,700 total. And that would go from $971 to $1,363 for the builder. The end user would pay 20%, going from $389 to $545. And then the fee to the rate base would go from $583 to $818 based on the current splits, Mayor.
So the builder pays, you're suggesting that they pay the full amount at the very beginning?
That is one option. That is one option, Mayor.
Instead of half the way they're doing it now.
That is correct. That is an option.
All right. Just so that everyone could be clear, so when questions are being asked. So we've got Councilor Flores, Gandara, Bencomo, and Sword. Councilor Flores? Thanks,
Thank you,
David.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Walsh and Mr. Mingus, and thank you, Mr. Dallahan. So let me see if I understand. I think the mayor already went through this. So the proposal today for the discussion today is for a proposed ordinance, and which would mean that we'd go back, the builder would pay 100%, and then what happens to the end use customer and rate base? Because it seems like the rate base would be paying a lot, and the end use customer would be paying a lot under the allocations at page 13 on the left-hand side. So,
Mr. Chairman,
are you proposing is the allocation option on the right-hand side?
So on the left-hand side is your current options between water and wastewater. On the right-hand side,
you mean your current? It's a current allocation.
It is the current allocation. That's by resolution from 1995.
Okay.
On the right-hand side, those are one of two options. That 100% of it goes to the builder, developer, and they pay for it at the time of permit, or it could be split between the end user when they sign up for customer service, the end use customer, or the developer builder, which allows the end use customer portion to still have a payment plan option within city procedures.
So the question I have is this, Mr. Dallahan, how would the end use customer, say the homeowner, how do they know what the builder has paid? Well, I guess they would know ab initio from the very beginning when they're looking at the possibility of buying that particular property. They'd see what the developer has paid, and so they wouldn't be surprised when they, at the time that they present their request occupancy, or?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, we have a disclosure requirement. I know we do when they sign up for a payment plan and they go to transfer the property when they're on the payment plan. But I believe the developer builder is obligated to tell them what is left outstanding on their portion of the impact fee. That's per our ordinance, per that resolution. And so they'll know what's coming to them.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, Delilah Walsh, Interim Utilities Director, if I may. The original assessment, as David mentioned in the history, the assessment takes place at the time the permit is originally issued. So that's part of the permitting process, and that record would exist because, again, we assess start, but it's the collection process that's different.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. Walsh. That makes it clear. So the collection there's two. So there are two options within the rescind and replace resolution.
Yes, ma'am, there are.
And would the resolution be stated in those two alternative terms, or would the decision be made for one or the other?
Mr. Mayor, staff would be recommending that it be one or the other only, not both.
Well, can staff make a, analysis as to which would be, and then the builder developer, say we opted for the developer at the time of permit, would be up to the builder developer to then get that from the end use customer?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Flores, as part of the building permit and before they get their certificate of occupancy, yes. And then when the end customer comes in to sign up for utility service, to turn their water on at the house, that's when they would be on the for their portion.
Oh, I see. So, well, wait a minute. If the allocation is all allocation of all of the diff is to the builder developer at the time of permit, and then
there is no impact.
Okay, there's no impact
To the end user.
no impact to the end user, but then when they go in to get their certificate of occupancy, they'd have to pay something at that point, or what?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Flores, you need to look at these as two options. This first bullet is one. If they pay 100% at the time of the building permit, then nothing is paid by the end user when they sign up for utilities. This is a second option, and it's an either or situation. So at this option, the builder pays for 50% of it at the time of the building permit, and then the end user homeowner comes in and pays when they sign up for service after their certificate of occupancy. And we would have the option of them to continue their payment plan, which is just a separate line item on their monthly utility bill until it's paid off. It's one or the other.
How would the first option to allocate all of the diff to the builder developer, how is that going to sit with them? I mean, are developers going to be happy with that? I mean, they're pretty much used to other people paying.
I
At
can't.
50%.
I don't want to speak for them, but you had, while you were out of office in September, they presented to the council their concerns. I'm sure they're going to not be ecstatic about it, but it's also a fee that I know that they pass on to their customer who's buying the home that they're building. They pass it on directly.
They pass it on directly anyway, right?
Anyway, yes, ma'am, they do.
Was that made clear to them since I missed that meeting?
We did not discuss fee allocations with the developers during that September work session. August work session, excuse me.
Yeah, August.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, Delilah Walsh again. I just want to, the difference, what would happen is that the upfront development cost changes because now the developer's paying at the time of permit rather than at the time of customer hookup. And so you're right, it's the upfront cost that increases. The total cost eventually does pass to the customer when they buy the home or purchase the property. However, it's just the upfront cost that's the differentiation.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Walsh, and thank you, Mr. Dollahan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Councilor Flores, you bring up a really good point, and I have to tell you that you would think that if we're going to discuss something such as this, we really need to hear what the developers say. The way it currently is, Councilor Flores, is so, and I think this is really just primarily when they have a house built. When it's a resale, that's another story. But when they have a house built and then they go to, and the house has been completed, then they need to go and get with the city, and then the city, the city has a payment plan, do they not, or David, or if a customer can't pay it all at one time, they do have a payment plan over so many months?
Yes, that is current practice, Mr. Mayor. We've had that since 1995.
Right. And so, Councilor Flores, I mean, we'll listen to what the rest of the council says, but I think we've already set up the one issue for our earlier discussion on the minimum wage. I think this lends itself, one of the things that needs another discussion. I think one of the things that when the city does something and we don't get a chance to involve the ones that this is directly impacting, I think we, at the very minimum, need to hear what they have to say.
Mr. Mayor, our intent was not to not hear from the Home Builders Association. We were presenting council with options, and we need to move forward with the impact fees. If there is a preference one way or another from the council, then we will go through the public input process in accordance with that before we bring back any resolution to amend Resolution 95-368. It was time for us to present the impact fees, which we need to impose sooner rather than later. This was a previous request, so we brought it forward. We can impose the fee and leave the current allocation in place and then modify the allocation.
Who requested it, David? Who requested it?
It was brought up a year ago when there was a question by Councilor Flores when we discussed the previous impact fees for parks. And
But this has nothing to do with parks.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just conveying to you what happened a year ago, that this was when it was brought up, and we need to update the impact fees. We have an obligation to review the impact fees every 5 years, and we're within that 5-year time frame. We're at the end of that 5-year time frame, and the fee needs to be updated.
I hear you. I just still think that we need to, I would have been glad to have allowed 10, or at the very minimum, the home builders and certain organizations to kind of chime in on this, but, and it's not too late. We need it, but I think it's important that we do that. This directly affects them. They can share with council exactly the pros and cons of doing something like this.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Lila.
Mr. Mayor, it's Lila Walsh again. I just want to sort of emphasize what David just said. The implementation of the impact fees can move forward, and our board will actually do that. We wanted to give council a heads up and let them know what the impacts are, what the changes were going to be, which is the decrease in the water impact fees and increase in the wastewater impact fees. However, we can implement those, and as David mentioned, bring back the allocation as a separate discussion or a separate resolution with the public hearing and anything that the council requires for discussion.
Delilah, please help me understand. You said you can move forward with it. You're implying you can move forward with a policy without the council support?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm saying we can implement the changes to the DIF itself. In other words, implement the decrease in the water impact fees and the increase in the wastewater impact fees through the Las Cruces Utility Board and leave the allocation as it appears today on the left-hand side of the slide. And so we would just implement them through the board, through our LCU board, pursuant to resolution 95-368 for allocation. And then if the council does want changes to allocation, you all can address that separately or together, however you'd like us to move forward. Essentially, that discussion is up to the council, 100% on how to allocate.
So this has already been cleared. This has been discussed with the utilities board?
Yes, sir. And it went through the CIAC, just like all the other impact fees. The board did not want to implement the new rates without answering this question, because as Mr. Dallahan brought up, it did come up during the rate or the impact fee review for parks. And so we didn't want to bring it to our board until this was either addressed or questioned or notified through the council.
Yeah, I guess I just don't remember the utility board members briefing council on this. That's okay.
So, if I may, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Walsh, then and Mr. Dallahan, then why would, if these could be bifurcated at this point, why were they brought to us as a joint potentials for separate action?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, this had been on the agenda in April of this year to present to council in an earlier work session, but due to issues related to COVID, it was pushed out multiple times until we could get to this meeting now. That's the only reason why. And we were still responding to the earlier comments from the parks discussion last year. We can proceed along those lines and do nothing except updating the fee and continue to split it. And then we'll follow direction from council on any public input process and the pros and cons associated with splitting up the allocation or doing away with the allocation. We're just making you aware and following through on previous requests. And I realize it's over a year ago, but it was requested of us.
So, Mr. Mayor, at this point, procedurally, and Mr. Dallahan, how would direction then go to Ms. Walsh or Mr. Dallahan or the powers that be in this regard to this question, to this issue, to this slide, to this presentation, to proceed with the rates adjustments, and then we'll deal with allocation options at a later date? Or
That's, yeah,
the whole thing's
exactly.
going to be brought to us as a package. I mean, if there's two different issues that can be bifurcated and voted upon differently, because they are different issues, somehow bringing it together was somewhat confusing to me. Now it's totally has been made abundantly clear, but somehow I think that the rescind and replace resolution is something that I think the city council should address. And, but somehow you're saying time is of the essence at this point, and the other issue has to be resolved at the very next council meeting, or what?
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to speak for Ms. Walsh as to when it would appear on the Utilities Board earliest agenda. I'm assuming October would be the earliest, because they just had a meeting last week. But it could be November. It could be a future effective date. I know we're implementing the new building permit fees in November, November 1st. So we could make it effective that same date, but the board would need to act on it and to approve the new fee amount. Water's going down and wastewater is going up, but then we can always come back to the allocation, because once the council acts on it, it really depends on when any new permit that comes in as when the permit is pulled, and depending on the allocation that's in place at that time.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
So, excuse me, Ms. Walsh, but so Mr. Mayor and Mr. Dahlham, just procedurally then. So what we were getting previously in the prior 12 slides was entirely on the issue as to rates.
No,
but
sir.
same resolution?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, up until slide 7, you were getting information on the rates.
Okay.
Slides 8 through 13 is on the allocation.
Is it the same resolution?
No, it is not.
I didn't think so. So it's really, well, for me, it's just been a little mind-boggling. I understand it all now. But the update and timeline somehow got squished in my mind, and somehow I thought it was the same. So we're dealing with two different items here. Okay.
Yes, we are.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Wilhelm. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, thank you very much for that, because you've exactly hit the nail on the head. The 1993 ordinance is the impact fee application itself, the 2700 and the 2100, and you're absolutely correct. And then the next half of the presentation was the new resolution in 1995 for the allocation. So you've actually clarified that perfectly.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Before I get to Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, I was just going to mention to EFO that if there's one thing that I think, and I can't speak for the rest of the council, but I think that there's been times in the past that it seems like council is going to be rushed. And I think sometimes we need to get a little bit, as much lead time as possible, and to really invite all those affected stakeholders so that council can make an informed decision and not have to move forward on something that they haven't had a chance to, no one has had a chance to discuss, and then find out that maybe could have been done a different way. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem and then Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mayor. Delilah and others. Great presentation you made. It really succinct and understandable. I've appreciated the report. I could actually understand it. And so I'm totally appreciative of that. One of the things throughout the way you divided it up, water and wastewater, there was some language in there that I wasn't quite sure why it was put in that way, in terms of where it was relating to apartment complexes and water, that it should be a certain way. And I got the impression it wasn't that way. Am I on the right track on that. And I say that because I wonder, I had a experience, and David Dullahan helped with this when we had to, individual landlord was changing their water from the various plans. We kept saying he was very concerned about it being very costly, and we said, well, you can go into it was a trailer park, that was when I started to realize that we kept saying you can go individually. He didn't want to go individually, I think, right, David? And I realized that this is the way we actually doled out payments and those kinds of things. And so I appreciated coming to a resolution that was much cheaper than he was anticipating. But still, I guess my concern is about my district, District 1, is paying for development in in the Sonoma Ranch area, in the west, in the East Mesa, for developers. Is that true? Is that accurate?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gondra, that is true because the rate base pays a portion. So every time somebody pays their monthly utility bill wherever they live for water or wastewater, a portion of that rate goes to pay development impact fees somewhere else in the community. You are absolutely 100% correct.
Mayor, and I don't think that's right. I don't think it's so unfair, because I have a district, the original town site, where there are many issues with water lines. Some in the older part of town are connected from one house to the other. They don't have single. When you look at some of the water lines specific to just the infrastructure, they're old, they're outdated. I mean, how does that help my district specifically? How does that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Mayor Pro Tem. Let me ask Delilah. So Delilah, so let's just say that you need to replace the water and wastewater lines in District 1. Are you going to take only monies that are derived from that district, or are you going to take it from the entire rate base?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gondra, sorry. Essentially what happens is the easy answer is no, because the easy answer is yes, actually, because when we do our long-term infrastructure.
Yes to what?
Yes, that we do charge everybody. The entire
for an area that needs to be redone.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And
so, I mean,
think about it, and I went back to slide 2 because our system is fully redundant. So we are not like a park or a fire station where everything stays within that one region. So we actually, just because we pump at a well in one district doesn't mean the water is being delivered to that same district.
Has the city? I'm sorry. Has the city replaced all of the water and wastewater lines in District 1?
No. And
is it fair to say that they're some of the oldest in the city?
Yes.
And would eventually need be replacing?
Yes, and that would be part of our CIP planning. And when we do our rate review, we put those projects, those replacement projects, we identify the biggest need for infrastructure replacement, and then we apply that to the entire rate base. So even if that project is just in District 1, because that's where the identified need is, it is spread out through the entire rate base through the rate review process.
Yeah, and if I may, for the benefit of Councilor Bencomo and Abeta Stuvey, so years ago, and it's interesting that David Dullahan brought up the park impact fee. Years ago, they used to do it district by district. And it got to the point where the only ones that were paying the park impact fee were District 5 and 6. And District 1 didn't have any new parks. And so, but then it got to the point where the other districts weren't getting anything. And so now it's spread out around the whole city. Because if you just left it to that particular district, districts 1 through 4 weren't getting anything. It was just 5 and 6 because that's where the development was at. So then we changed it so that, you know, you kind of, so that the whole city shared in on that instead of just that particular district. So if we do this, then that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to actually go back to the way it was in a roundabout way with the park fees, and it just going in you know, being raised in just in one area instead of it being spread out, because we all benefit, newer areas and older areas. It's just that simple. And if you start making it to the point where you have the mindset that because your area doesn't benefit from it, they do benefit, because eventually they're going to have their water and wastewater lines replaced.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, David.
I'll clarify one thing. Development impact fees cannot be used to pay for maintenance or repair of older lines. That's taken out of utility bonds, which are paid by utility impact fees. And I would argue that with the exception of affordable housing, if a new house goes into a vacant lot in Council District 1, because we're talking about Councilor Gonda's area right now, they have to pay the water and wastewater impact fees because they are impacting the system because it was not anticipated before. And so therefore they have to pay the fee. Most of the development is occurring in districts 5 and 6, though there is some that has occurred in District 4 and a little bit in District 2, but development can occur anywhere, and these fees apply citywide. And the reason I bring up affordable housing is the city has an exception to the anti-donation clause that we can pay for development impact fees on behalf of affordable housing, which we have done in limited situations. But every ratepayer is on the hook for replacing water lines. Unfortunately, we've had to replace water lines in newer development in some parts because we have a failure, and that's what happens. That's where we do capital improvement planning, but somebody has to pay for it.
Yeah, but the impact fees, David, those go into another pot of money, so to speak.
They're in a separate fund, yes, sir.
Yeah, and it's used throughout the city.
No, it is used where we can demonstrate it's paying for the increased impact to the system. Where we need a bigger line because we had an 8-inch line and we now need a 12-inch line because of growth in the eastern or western portion of the city.
Yeah.
We have to document that it is going for the benefit of new development.
I guess I understand about the park fees. I do. I guess I'm speaking specifically to water and wastewater in my district, that I'm paying for something, a development that's happening at Sonoma, you know, that area, the East Mesa. I don't understand how, Mayor, is it appropriate? Is it legal? I mean, how does larger communities do, Albuquerque and other places, when they're growing leaps and bounds? How is that happening? I guess I'm interested in knowing that. I have a problem with it. And I don't know that percentage should be as much as it is for the base rate payer. It doesn't feel good to me, and I think there needs to be research done specifically because it doesn't feel right.
No, I hear what you're saying, Mayor Pro Tem. I think, but want to have it done up front and not have, I guess it would be, if I was to do any changes myself, if I had my druthers, would be to, I probably would be supportive of that, but still allow the payment plan and still allow the person to pay the second half like they have been, like what you saw earlier, where you had many people paying on a payment plan, and instead of expecting the contractor or builder to front the cost 100% up front. Because I got the impression that would be the city's position. utilities position, and I just think that that's a little bit too much.
Yeah.
I
guess I understand, and I understand, and I guess to your point, my questions would be, like, I'm sure this is a recording nightmare. And I wondered how many people who are on a payment plan are behind. How much are they behind? You know, from the perspective of that end payer, the person who purchased the home, because as Mr. Dollahan suggested, the developer passes on the price or the total, right, to the end user, the end buyer. So I guess when I think about all those things, and I think about those people who move from one place to another and still owe the city, and I guess, do they pay it, and how?
Mr. Mayor, I can't speak for utilities on the number of people that are behind on their utility bills as part of this, but I will say this: the impact fee is assessed at the property level. So if one person moves to another property elsewhere, I don't believe that impact fee payment goes with them. It stays with the property. And I see Delilah shaking her head. Yes, so I've confirmed. So that would not, if somebody was behind on their development impact fee portion of their bill and they moved to another property, say an apartment downtown, that portion of the bill would not follow them. That stays with the property. It is property-based fee. And so the next occupant would be on the hook for that portion of their fee. And going back to a comment the mayor made about the city staff does not have, we're fine with either one of the options that we presented. That would pretty much continue with the current practice. We could split it between the builder and the rate base and the end user. What we're trying to get away is from the rate base paying a portion of the fee. And we can allocate it any way that the council wants, and we can allocate it differently in the future.
You wouldn't prefer it be paid 100% up front?
Mr. Mayor, that would be the easiest, but we already have the system in place for the
That would be the
split.
easiest too. I'd prefer that myself, but I don't think that's realistic.
Mayor,
Mr. Mayor,
how would that roll out for the base rate? You can't.
No, that has nothing to do. I told you that I would be supportive of that. I would prefer the current rate, the way we do it, add the base rate in, but still allow the payment plan to take place, because it'll be a little bit more of a challenge for a builder to have to front 100% of the costs. So, let's say they have $10,000 to build some houses and they were going to allocate $2,500 for their 50%. That means they can build four houses, as opposed to having to pay it all off at one time. They can only maybe do 2 houses, something of that nature. I'm just using that as an example.
No.
Councilor,
yes, David.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gonda, we can continue on with the payment plans. If there's this portion that is committed to the end user customer, we're not taking away the customer payment plan. We realize that is something that is necessary, because not everyone understands it or is given the disclosure that they should be given. So if you want to split it between the builder and the end user, if there's an end user portion, we would recommend continuing the payment plan for the end user.
Yeah. David, so what is the amount to the base? What is the amount, average amount? Yvonne, why are you shaking your head? No, you don't even know what I'm asking. The base rate amount, do you know?
Yes, we can go to one of our historical slides at the end. Keep going. It's the appendix slides. keep going. All right, so this is for the water development fees. This is how it's split currently between the white, the blue on the left is the current fee. This is the proposed fee, and this is how it is split. But Delilah, would you go ahead a couple more slides? There is a historical slide. Let me show you this, Counselor. By year, this is by fiscal year 16, 17, 18, and 19. The rate base paid $200,000 in, that was their highest year in 18 and 19 of the impact fee out of a total $890,000 in the last full fiscal year. That's for water. And then there's a similar slide that we have for wastewater, and that was 400,000 out of $1,300,000 as of fiscal year 19, and it fluctuates by year.
So does that tack on, like, what does that mean to the rate payer, the base rate? Like,
it's a portion of your bill. It's in your bill.
Every year you put like so much cents spread out to the hundreds of thousands of people we have on water. I think it was 72,000 or something.
We have about 30. We have 35,000 plus customers on water and wastewater.
Okay.
And it's split. It is part of the rates, and it is split to every person. You are correct.
Okay. Okay.
It is a portion of their bill when they pay for water and wastewater.
And that gets factored in yearly, depending on the development.
It's factored in when they did the rate case setting, and it's adjusted every 4 years.
Got it. Okay. Okay. I'm understanding this more. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I feel really strongly about that base rate. I realize that as we grow, our infrastructure gets better, and we have a certain responsibility as a base rate. But I am concerned that, especially in our historic districts and our older districts, that the infrastructure needs to improve, and I don't see a lot of that happening. And meanwhile, and I'm going to change that, other than advocating at capital outlay time, right, for CIP projects and the like. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and my apologies to Mayor Pro Tem Gandara. I wasn't trying to preempt anything you might have you asked, but I think that what I understood is that what we have before us at this point is to remedy that concern, which was my concern that brought this whole thing up, about the rate base and, you know, the way it was about parks, but it's about the distribution of, or the allocations as to who's paying for certain things. And so the options that this proposed resolution gives us, or the options that we can set forth in a resolution, is either to, it would eliminate the rate base, which I think is totally unfair. And agree with you, Mayor Pro Tem. So that 22% would be eliminated, and it would become entirely 50% for the end use customer, which is the consumer, the buyer of that property. So that's the only, I think that if we fully understand that now, we can have a resolution that reflects, after, I guess, a full meeting with the people who are concerned, who are affected by this. The end use customers at this point are unknown people because they haven't purchased anything or about to. For those who are about to purchase, perhaps they may be around in town, but it's really the builder. and the builder would still be responsible for 50%. And then the end use customer would be how they opt to pay for it, either on a time basis with the agreement with the city or not, is their option. So that's all I wanted to do, just to clarify that, because I think it is unfair. I don't think that there's any benefit to any other district, except it isn't as if there's a distribution of these fees to the other parts of the city. And so I think that, I hope that our other counselors agree with us. Maybe they don't. I think they would. But anyway, and again, my apologies to you, Mayor Pro Tem. I didn't mean any disrespect. Just, I don't know, maybe Edie's barking a lot. It's her fault. Anyway.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Councilor
Dolan.
Flores. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you again, Mr. Dolan. Ms. Delilah.
Okay, so was that the end of the presentation?
Yes, Mayor, it was.
Okay, so let's work on getting another round up some of the interested stakeholders, but I think the proposal to move forward, like how you mentioned, I guess is acceptable, and then we'll come back after listening to what the stakeholders said. But if councils seem to be supportive of the basically the way it is right now, just change the rate-based users to shift to the owner, and that seems acceptable. But let's still have I think it's important to still at least have that discussion with them.
Mr. Mayor, what we'll do is we'll allow utilities to proceed with the fee implementation, and then we'll work up a public input process on the options. But we'll present the option as splitting it between the rate-based portion back to the end customer.
Okay, good enough.
And then as appropriate, Mayor, if that's generally supported within the community, then we can just bring back a new resolution?
Yes.
Or do you want another work session?
No, I think after we listen to the stakeholders, I think it's probably going to be okay.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? All right, well, then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, Gandara.
Second by Flores.
Okay, motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Gondeta, second by Councilor Flores that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
And then I'll stay on for the agenda setting meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councilor. And whenever you're ready, Christine, just let me know.
I'm ready when you are.
Just give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to look up this address. 2600 Silver Hawk. Silver Hawk. Where in the world is that? Some change. Single. Okay. All right, I'm ready. Okay, so this is the agenda setting meeting for the September 21st, 2020 City Council meeting. Number 1, non-consent.
1 non-consent.
2, consent.
2 consent.
3, non-consent.
3 non-consent.
4, consent.
4 consent.
5, non-consent.
5 non-consent.
6, consent.
6 consent.
7, consent.
7 consent.
8, non-consent.
8 non-consent.
9, non-consent.
9 non-consent.
10, consent.
That's, okay. 10 consent. Sorry, I thought it was a first read.
11 non-consent
11 non-consent,
and 12 non-consent.
12 non-consent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you.